Welcome to Bread Beckers. We're so happy to have you here. We're going to get started here shortly. We have a great menu breakfast for you this morning. We have some Ezekiel mixed pancakes made with wheat, spelt, barley, millet, lentils, and 3 kinds of beans that we ground into flour. We have one of my family favorites, streusel coffee cake. We have freshly ground grits, okay? I don't know how many Northern Americans, I'm being nice, are in here today. You have to taste them. We have a 2-bite rule, and they're made the way they're supposed to be made, with salt and pepper and cheese. Cheese, not sugar. You don't put, that goes in the tea. Y'all just get it wrong. So anyway, so it was corn just a little while ago. We just ground it up in a blender to make a coarse ground grits for you. And then to give y'all some extra protein and savory, Brad has smoked you some sausage that he's having a little trouble getting done, Sarah. So, yeah, it's just a chicken, green-wise Italian sausage, and we made it extra special in the Cameron stove top smoker. And if y'all need a Christmas gift, I'm telling you, that's a cool one. It's $50, and it just, you smoke chicken, vegetables, cheese. You can do your own nuts right in the wonderful comfort of your kitchen instead of having to go outside and grill. But anyway, I always like to share a little devotional and just tell you, and then I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then we'll get started. A few years ago, I was really struggling, going through a trial, and I had been praying and just not seeing the answer that I wanted. And I do my Bible reading every day, but later that day I had been praying with a friend of mine, and she said, Sue, just ask God to give you a specific word, a promise that you can hang on to. And I was like, okay. I said, as long as it's not His grace is sufficient for me. I'm like, that'll be fine. So I used this little devotional book, and I hadn't read my devotional for that day. So I opened it up. This was back in July, several years ago. July 23rd, my grace is sufficient for you was the first line. And I'm like, no, that's not what I wanted. And it says, grace enables you to do what you need to do and to live like me. My grace is unmerited supernatural favor. I think because of the context, Paul's praying for God to remove whatever this thorn is. So we take it to mean, no, I'm not going to heal you. But he says, my grace is unmerited supernatural favor. Speak grace into your situation, finances, marriage, relationships, friendships. Grace and peace go hand in hand. You have different gifts provided to you through my grace. Use them. I have poured out my grace upon you abundantly. You will never run out. And just this week, I'm often asked to speak and teach in place of my pastor when he goes. And I told him, I said, God's getting me a sermon ready, so whenever you're ready. But part one of the verses is Hebrews 4, I think it's 15 and 16. It says, we have a great high priest who is not unable to sympathize with our every weakness, but he was tempted in every way. Therefore, we can approach the throne of grace boldly, it says, to ask for mercy and grace to help us in our time of need. So I don't know who needed to hear that today, because that was, usually I just read whatever the devotional is for the day, but I felt really led to share that. So we're going to pray, thank the Lord for the food, and they'll start serving it, and we'll get on with the day. So thank you, Lord, for this glorious day. Thank you for your grace. It truly is sufficient for us, because it is our power to accomplish the things that you have instilled in us and called us to do. So we thank you for this food, for all the hands that prepare it. And Lord, I just pray for a special blessing on every household represented here, that you would bless them. And God, I ask, lead us all back to your way of living, being, doing, and even eating, Lord, so that we might be a shining light in this dark and sick world. Thank you, Lord, for this time, and may you bless us and keep us. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. So I am Sue Becker, and many, many years ago, I graduated high school, went off to Athens, Georgia, the University of Georgia, as a pre-med student. After I got there, and I was like, why am I going this way? I love the study of physiology, biochemistry, the way the body worked. I wanted to save the world. But I got there and I'm like, number one, I don't want to be in school that long. And number two, I knew I did not want that grueling a career after I graduated college. I knew I ultimately wanted to be a wife and a mother, and I'm not saying you can't do both and be a doctor, but I knew that wasn't the path I wanted to take. Got accepted into pharmacy school, spent 1 quarter there, and went, this isn't really what I want to do either. And the dean of pharmacy school led me to food science. Food science was an up-and-coming industry at the time. It's a broad industry, so I had many options of paths to take, and I chose food microbiology. And after graduating University of Georgia, I worked as a microbiologist for Kraft Foods for almost 5 years until I had my first child. And then I became a stay-at-home mom, and I did accomplish being a wife. I met Brad at the University of Georgia, and we married our senior year there. And then we have 9 children, 7 biological children, and we have our 18th and 19th grandchild on the way. So we're very, very happy and very blessed. But after graduation, I continued to study because I loved studying the human body. I often laugh and say I'm a much better student now than I ever was in college. I think you kind of get burned out with having to take the tests and perform. And now I just love reading my physiology and biochemistry books. And I didn't always love that, but enjoyed that. And so after I graduated, just continued to read the works of like Adele Davis. She was the renowned biochemist of the day, and studying the nutrients and what they do in your body and how they work. And we ate real food for the most part. When I started having children, I found a pediatrician that believed in healthy eating. I made my own baby food, all of these things. And so we were eating real, and I grew up Southern, so there was no packaged stuff at my house. It was real meat, real fruit, real vegetables, and I made everything from scratch. And I knew that whole wheat flour was better, so I was buying this whole wheat flour from the store. Have anybody ever tried to work with the whole wheat flour from the store? If you haven't, don't. It's nasty. I'm just going to tell you that. It's nasty because the same steel rolling mills that now separate the bran and germ and make white flour, they make the whole wheat flour. They remove the oil. They put some of the bran and germ back in. But when they remove that oil, it makes the flour very gritty and grainy, and they do that so that the flour won't spoil as quickly. So it's nasty, and so I tried to use it, but it was nasty. So I just don't know how else to describe it. Made everything very gritty, and so I'd have to put white flour in to make a decent loaf of bread. So I kind of gave up and just bought the best whole wheat bread from the store that I could find. And we won't go into all that. Just listen to the podcast. You can learn more. But so that's how I was feeding my family. But in 1991, I was introduced to the whole concept of milling your own grain in home and making your own flour, making all of your own bread. And that journal was entitled How to Greatly Reduce the Risk of Common Diseases. In that journal, the history of white flour was presented. And all I can say is I must have missed that class in food science. I don't know where I was, or just maybe it just didn't click. It was my moment. When I read of the steel rolling mills and them taking the bran and germ out, and then the epidemic diseases that occurred shortly after, and they knew it was the missing bran and germ, and then the journal also had a brief discussion on the common diseases that plague America: heart disease, cancer, diabetes, constipation, irritable bowel, diverticulitis, varicose veins. And a short little few paragraphs and how it's directly related to the missing fiber and nutrients that are in our flour and the bread that we have in the store today. I knew it was scientifically correct. It was a Christian publication. I knew it was scientifically correct, but biblically correct as well. And I was convinced. I'm like, we're doing this. Now, my idea was that this freshly milled flour was going to taste like the store-bought whole wheat flour that I was buying from the store, but I didn't care at that point. I'm like, I don't care. If we have to choke this down, we're eating it, and you're going to eat it, and you're going to eat it. Didn't matter. So much to my surprise, Brad bought me a mill in 1991 for my birthday, and yeah, you can. So maybe not a vacuum cleaner, but, a mill. But anyway, so the mill came into our home. I was so excited. I milled flour. I made bread. It was delicious. It was this fluffy, light, delicious loaf of bread. My children loved it. We all ate it. I didn't have to coerce them like I did with other things. Because over the years, I've read about all kinds of things. We did green drinks. We did brewer's yeast. And they were like, no. That tastes nasty. Looks like goose poop. You should not put that in your mouth. And so I couldn't get them to do those things. And honestly, I'm not still doing those things because maybe they gave me some energy, but they didn't help a lot of other issues. Because milled flour, made bread, ate bread, pooped the next morning. What? This is glorious. And so struggled with constipation all my life. Outside of chemical laxatives, I had tried all sorts of natural remedies and nothing helped until I ate bread and pooped the next morning. And I can stand here and tell you today I've not been constipated since 1991. I know that's what you paid your money for and thankfully they haven't given you your food yet. So yeah, and that's about all we'll talk about. Maybe not, but anyway, because if you want to hear more, get our free CD. If you don't have a CD player, listen to the podcast. You will hear it. They call it Mom's Poopy Talk. But we're the most constipated nation in the world, so it's a big issue. And constipation, if you watch my video, Real Bread, the Staff of Life, you'll see it's the front domino. Everything kind of stacks up. A lot of things stack up behind that. So I have a timer going off. If y'all will pause this thought for just a moment, I'm going to check my bread. It's some you're going to eat in just a minute. I made it in a Pullman loaf pan is what it's called. And we're going to check and see if it's done. This is a special Pullman pan if you have kids that think that bread slices should be square. This could be your best friend. Thank you. Let's make sure it's done. The best way to tell if your bread is done is to use an instant read thermometer. We have a couple of styles out there. You're shooting for 180, 190, maybe even to 200, but I'm at 195, so that's perfect. My bread is done. This is one of our USA pans. They are aluminized steel, but they're coated with silicone, so your bread never touches the metal. And they're perfectly nonstick. Did not spray or grease this in any way. So there's your Pullman pan. This loaf was made with 2 parts red wheat and 1 part white wheat. I'm going to let it cool a little bit before they serve it with some butter. But because supposedly you're not supposed to cut bread while it's hot, but good luck with that. So if this were at home, I would probably already be digging in. So yeah, so I realized this was different. It was healthy food my family enjoyed and wanted to eat, and I didn't have to coerce them, like I said. And then I started making pancakes and our favorite coffee cake and muffins and bread and cinnamon rolls and donuts, and everything made from flour is now made with our freshly ground whole grain. Within a month, again, like I said, my constipation was gone. My sinus congestion was gone. I lived on antihistamines prior to bread. And I can tell you today, 1991 was the last time I had an antihistamine or a decongestant of any kind. My energy levels, I had 5 young children by that point, three very close together within 3 years I had, because I decided to let the Lord control the number of children I had, because children are a blessing, and he didn't. And so I had 3 children in 3 years. But then I went on to have number 6, number 7, and then we adopted 2. So anyway, so I homeschooled the children, so I had a lot on me. I noticed the energy difference. I noticed also that I just didn't get sick that often. Prior to bread, I got strep throat at least twice a year. I was kind of a sickly kid in school, just a lot. I had pneumonia when I was very young, but now I can say I just don't remember. Brad and I got some kind of little flu. We came home from 3 weeks in Tanzania and 24 hours of flying, and yeah, so we got a little, but we were over it in a couple of days, so that's the way it goes. And then I began to notice that with my children too. If you haven't listened to Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast, I highly recommend, and this week's episode is me interviewing my son David on the kind of the perspective of growing up with real bread. Warts went away. Kids were healthier, no more ear infections. In the 25 years of feeding our family this way, our children only needed a doctor for a visit, for an illness twice. That's, for 9 children, that's pretty significant, because some people go 2 times a week and they only have 2 children. I just cannot tell you enough how this has changed my life. Of all the things I've studied to bring health and wellness to your body and to your family, this is the most significant. And all the things, other things I've studied, brewer's yeast, green drink, these things, I'm not doing any of those. But here, 33 years later, I am more passionate today about milling my own grain and making my own bread than I was 33 years ago. And some of us, within a week of our New Year's resolution, we're done. We're like, here, it's not bringing any results. This is one you will see results. So, y'all ready to get started? All right, I'm going to show you how easy it is. I remember in the early days of milling my own grain, I would make recipes and, make bread or make coffee cake and make muffins and take them to church functions and things like that. And people would go, oh man, this is so good. I want your recipe. And I'm like, sure, I'll share my recipe with you, but I mill my own flour. 2 questions they would always ask me. First question, you do what? How many of y'all mill your flour? Do you get that? You do what? I mill my own flour. The second question I just thought was hilarious for the longest time until I studied the history of grain mills and how they have morphed over the years. The second question was, where do you live? And I think they were envisioning either a grist mill or a barn with an ox treading out the grain and a big stone. I'm like, I live in a tiny little 1,300 square foot house with a tiny little kitchen, but my mill sits right on my counter. So that's the fun thing about the grain mills of today. They're electric. You don't have to do this unless you need. This company is the WonderMill. The company is Grote Molen. It is probably, in my opinion, one of the easiest, fastest, cleanest mills to use. Very, very durable. My personal mill at home is 25 years old, heavy, heavy use. I've never had it repaired. We repair very, very, very little of these mills. If you do need to repair, it's usually because you put something in it that wasn't supposed to go in there. And and Brad or my son David can repair them right here. But we're talking very seldom. The milling head mechanism is stainless steel. It's called a micronizing milling head. This head is stationary, and this one spins very fast, faster than I can show you, but fits right inside of each other. They got this idea from the pharmaceutical industry. They use this type of milling head to mill drugs so that they're very fine, very consistent sized particles so that every capsule, once they encapsulate that powder, is consistent in medication. So someone back in the 1980s decided, why can't we use this for grain? And so they started using and developed and designed the micronized milling heads. So very fast, very efficient, will grind any kind of dry grain or bean into flour. So here's how you put the WonderMill together. This is the base unit. The milling heads are here. So you have this flour canister, and that's another thing I like about the micronizing milling mills is that they have an enclosed canister, so your flour goes straight into here. So this is the WonderMill. We do carry another brand called the NutriMill. You're going to see our employees are mostly going to gravitate towards this one as well as myself because this is what we've all used and we have in our milling station. But here's how it works. Very, very simple. You have this cup. You might be able to tell where you are. There's a little flat side to the cup. Can you see that there's flat right there? Now my mill's been used a lot, so the little tab is missing, but there's still a little nub there so I can see your mill, your new mill will have little arrows showing you right where to put it, but you can see you just put that flat side parallel to that little tab, and then you just snap it into place. It looks like it should twist, but it doesn't. It just snaps into place. And that's what a lot of people will twist it and then tear that little tab off. Doesn't matter. That little tab is just to show you where to put the cup. The cup does 2 things. It covers this hole right here, and because that's a blast of air coming down into your flour canister, so it just covers that so it's not blowing the flour everywhere, but also putting it on correctly helps the gravitational feed of the grain down into the milling heads. But I mean, if you forget to put it on once, you haven't killed your mill. If you don't put it on the right way, you haven't killed your mill. But okay, that there is a correct way of doing it. So once you have that snapped on, you're going to snap the lid into place. Now the lid, let me just tell you something about the lid. Mine has been used and used, so it's very easy to get the lid on. Yours might be like wrangling a bear, like it won't go on. It'll loosen up over time, so it might be a little tight at first. But here's a trick I have learned. Do you see these 3 tabs, the ears or whatever you want to call them? If you will work from these back towards the gray tube, because if you see it's not as thick there where the gray tube is, you see that? Because of the tube being there, it's more flexible there. So if you work towards those back towards that gray tube, wow, that one went on very easily. Okay. It'll be a lot easier to snap on. Like I said, sometimes they'll be really tight in the beginning, and you might feel a little budge. It's not on. It's not on, believe me, okay? Just, you might go, oh, okay, I think it's on. No, if you don't hear that very distinct snap, it's not on. And I tell you that because when you go to mill and hook it all up, when you turn that mill on, if that lid's not on, it's gonna go boop, and you're not gonna know until flour is shooting across the room, okay? So very distinct snap, you wanna hear that, okay? And this one's pretty loose, but it'll even more distinct on some. So now we just twist that little tube. And you may be thinking, that's a lot of stuff. You will get to where you just do it. See, did you see? I already twisted the tube and was about to connect it before I told you what I was doing. You'll just do it. So then you connect the tube into this port here, and now you're ready to mill. The biggest use requirement on this mill is only mill dry grains and beans. Okay, you can't put peanuts in here and get oozing out nut butter. Oh, you might ooze it out, but that will be the last of your mill. So nothing oily, no nuts, no seeds, no flaxseed, no chia seeds. Use a little blender for those. Any kind of dry grain or bean into flour. No almonds, even though they call almond flour. That you can't do that. Okay, so grains and beans. It will do corn. The reason I used a blender for the grits was so it'll be more coarse. This really makes flour, okay, out of the corn. But yes, it's delicious. If you've never had freshly ground cornbread, oh, it's so good. If you wanted a little more coarse, you can use popcorn as opposed to dent corn. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So only grind what you're supposed to, and we do have a list out there of what you're not supposed to grind. And then turn the mill on before you fill it, okay? So we're just gonna turn the mill on. This is your coarseness, fineness dial. To be honest, the micronizing mills mill the flour so fine, you're not gonna see a huge difference between fine and coarse. So for most things, I just kind of turn mine to, I call it 12 o'clock or just kind of straight up. But if I'm doing a cake, I might try to remember to take it over to the pastry, but it's very indistinguishable, the difference in the coarse and fine. So we just want to turn that machine on and pour your grain in. This was red wheat. Now, you're going to hear the pitch change. When you hear that pitch change, you just let it run a few seconds, which I'm usually getting ingredients ready. Just walk over, turn it off. This mill just cleaned itself. Ha ha. Kitchen appliance that cleans itself. How wonderful is that? So no taking it apart. You never have to break it down and sweep out the milling heads. And that's one of the things I like about the stainless steel milling heads is they're self-cleaning and they don't collect residual flour and oils, which can then cake up and attract bugs or whatever. I know that we do carry stone mills. We carry the Como and we carry the mock mill. If you want those have gotten very, very popular now because somebody thinks that stone milling is better than this. But it's just a matter of preference. Some of the stone mills are prettier and take up less space on your counter. They're wooden. They look nice, but the flour does go into an open bowl, which I like the fact that it goes into a canister, and then they're slower. In just a few minutes, I'll grind enough to make bread for the basic bread dough recipe, and it's going to take just a matter of seconds. And in their stone mills that are slower, it may take as much as 4 to 5 minutes to grind that same amount of flour. So, but it's just your preference, and we do sell them. But like I said, we gravitate towards this one, and we would be here forever if I showed you every mill that we have. But we do have them out on the shelf for you to see. One thing I didn't tell you, the hopper here holds 8 cups of grain. That mills into 12 cups of flour. Obviously, you can mill less, but if you need to mill more than 12 cups of flour, you've got to empty the flour out of this canister and mill again. You can't just keep pouring in if you filled it full with 8 cups, because what will happen is you'll overfill your flour canister and it'll back up into this tube and then back up into the milling heads. But the wonderful thing about that machine, if you ever do that, you might think that you've killed it because it'll make this awful sound. It'll go, and you're done. It turns itself off. It's got this wonderful little reset button on the bottom. It automatically shuts off so that it doesn't overheat. Then just unplug it, and you got to stick something in there and dig that flour out and just keep kind of joggling it until it pushes that flour out.
If you need repairs for any of the mills, they have to go back to
any of
wherever
the
it
other
came
mills.
from. We can repair the WonderMills here.
Yeah, which is
Nobody else lets me repair their mills, but WonderMill does.
So here's our freshly milled flour, and I'm just gonna dump it in this little bowl and let them pass it around, let y'all feel it. See the little, I kind of see the brown specks there? The first mill I ever sold, the customer called and said, what is this brown stuff in my flour? And I said, the whole reason you're milling your flour. That's the reason we're milling the flour. It's not dirt, it's not, you know. Like I said, there's no cleaning to the base. It does have a lid that can come with it that I keep on the base of my mill when I'm not using it, because I have a very small kitchen at home and my mill sits just to the left of my sink. So I just want to make sure no water or anything splashes in there. So I keep that lid on. The flour canister, obviously you can wash it and dry it, you know, ready for next use. It's a flour canister to me. If you're one of those that takes your flour canister out and washes it, go right ahead. I am not, so I washed it today for y'all, so it's nice and clean. You can totally wash the cup as well. The cup is going to collect the really, really, really fine flour. I mean, if you take some of that out, it's going to feel like talcum powder. There is no bran or germ, no coarseness in there at all. It's perfectly fine to use. You'll see me, I'll just tap it like that into there and just use it. Now, I cleaned it so there wasn't a lot of residual flour in there. Now, let's talk about this lid. As a food scientist, and I don't even think you have to be a food scientist, you look at that tube and you go, if I immerse this in water and get water in that tube, how am I going to make sure that tube is completely dry? So if it's not, what's going to happen when the flour flows through there, it can clog up because of moisture being in there. But the biggest thing to me was, this is a dark tube. There's all kinds of little, you know, twisting things here, connections. If I get moisture in there, that's a perfect place for mildew or mold to kind of, because of the moisture. So I just never wash this lid. We sell these little cheap pastry brushes for you to just dust that off from time to time. Again, it's not real regular that I do that. I'll mill the whole days leading up to a class when I'm prepping before I clean my canister lid. But that's it. All right? Any questions on the WonderMill? So she asked, is this the kind I've been using since 1991? Actually, the first mill that was the micronizing mill, the brand was a K-Tech, and then the second one that came out was a Magic Mill, and it was a little cube. But so no, this is not the original mill. This one came out, I think, in about 93 or 4, maybe as late as 95. So I guess, yeah, so maybe not quite 25 years. But the original mill, mine is still back there. Those stainless steel milling heads are very strong and powerful. But it sounded like, if you thought this was loud, how many of you thought this was loud? I think the stone mills are louder. The original mill sounded like Delta just landed in your kitchen. I mean, like on your counter. I thought, I'm going to live a long, long life because I'm going to be so healthy, but I will be deaf in just a matter of years. It was very loud. This one is called it was originally called the Whisper Mill, and that company went under, and so this company took it over, and now it's called the WonderMill. And everybody laughed when they said Whisper, and I'm like, comparatively, it's a whisper, because this sounds like Delta flew overhead. The other one landed in your kitchen. But I've been using this since probably 95, 4, somewhere in there. I don't really remember when the change happened, but yep. And it was my demo mill until we incorporated and had the kitchen here. So, yeah. All right, so that's the WonderMill, and like I said, we do have others out there. The NutriMill just goes together a little differently. One other thing I will say about the WonderMill is when this company took over, it's called Grote-Molen, when they took over the manufacturer, it was in a matter of a short few years, they put in an LG motor, and they tested that LG motor, and they ran this mill for days, and it never overheated. They rigged it up with a hopper that just kept putting grain in the hopper here, and they put this into a 55-gallon drum and just let it run to see how long you could actually mill this before it burned up, and it never did. So it's a very, very durable, I think very easy to use. There's no, this is the coarseness fineness. Now, you're not going to get a lot of differentiation from coarse to fine, and that is one of the attractions of the stone mills. You can go to cracked grain to fine flour. And but if I want cracked grain, I just put mine in a blender and it's ready in seconds. We all have blenders, so it's just a matter of preference. I encourage you to look and see. All right, so let's make some bread. Y'all ready? All right, so we're going to start with yeast bread. So for yeast bread, you need a particular kind of wheat. Okay, so there's actually like 7 categories of wheat, but for our purposes, there's basically 2 types. There's hard wheat and there's soft wheat, okay? Hard wheat is a high protein, lower moisture wheat that is grown in the colder, drier climates of our country, the breadbasket states, the Dakotas, Montana, Nebraska, Kansas, where it gets a colder, drier growing season. Soft wheat is grown where it's a little warmer, wetter growing season. In fact, to grow soft wheat in Montana, they have to irrigate to get more moisture. Soft wheat is your pastry flour. Hard wheat is your yeast bread making wheat, okay? So because of the protein, the higher protein, you need that. So how many of you have heard of this evil demon called gluten? Gluten that's making everybody sick, okay? Well, let me just tell you what gluten is. Gluten is not even in grain. It is something that is formed. It's actually kind of a culinary term for the stretchy substance that forms when you wet wheat flour. And guess who put that in grains? Because it comes from 2 specific proteins. Glutenine and gliadin are 2 unique proteins to the wheat family. No other family of grains has a significant amount of those amino acids or proteins. And God put them in there, and they've been in there since the beginning of time. So when you wet wheat flour, hydrate it, those 2 proteins form this stretchy substance called gluten. And you're going to see gluten in just a little bit, okay? And it's always been there, which is why wheat has been the king of bread making, yeast bread making, sourdough bread making since the beginning of time. But you need a harder wheat, a higher protein wheat, and that grows in the colder, drier climates. Does that make sense to you? So the problem is, it's not necessarily gluten, it's the fact that they've stripped the bran and germ away, and the bread you're eating in the store is protein and starch. God never intended us to eat wheat without all the vitamins and all the minerals and all the fiber that keeps things cleaned out and going, okay? So hard wheat is what you want when you have a yeast leavened bread. Soft wheat we'll talk about a little bit more when we make some muffins, but like I said, it's considered a pastry flour. It's a higher moisture. It's called soft wheat because you can kind of bite into it a little easier and chew it without breaking your teeth. So it's a softer grain. It is what Georgia grows. Most of our Georgia wheat is cattle feed, but we do sell 2 types of soft wheat here as well as 2 types of hard wheat. We have hard red, hard white, soft red, soft white. Our soft red is Georgia grown. But like I said, the soft wheat is your pastry flour. Cakes, cookies, pie dough, biscuits. Does that make sense to you now? Why maybe Southerners, our bread is biscuits and cornbread because we grow corn, and not necessarily yeast bread. I always tell the story on my mom. My mom was a wonderful cook. Her mother before her was known for her cakes and biscuits and fruit cake and pound cake. My grandmother worked her way through Young Harris College making biscuits in the cafeteria. My mother was a preacher's kid, and she worked her way through Wesleyan Girls School in Macon, Georgia, making biscuits in the cafeteria. My mother never made yeast bread. We never had yeast bread on our table for meals. It was either cornbread or biscuits. And so when I started doing this, my mother was very Southern. She talked like this. And you just didn't know how long it was going to take her to tell you her story. And especially answer the phone. If you called my house, my mother would go, hello. And the phone was in the kitchen, hanging on the wall. And people would call my house to hear my mother answer the phone and call us. She would go, hello, just a minute. And you'd hear her put the phone down. And then she'd come to the hall and she'd go, Sue, darling, telephone. But anyway, so my mother made biscuits through college, and when I started this and making yeast bread, my mother loved it. She loved my cinnamon rolls. She loved for me to bring her bread, and she just thought, this is glorious, And so one day I was like, Mom, I can teach you how to do this. I can get you a mill, and I can teach you how to do this. And she looked at me and she goes, yeast bread scares me, just like that. So I don't want you to be scared. It's so easy to do. You just got to have the right flour. And so for yeast breads, you want a hard wheat. And we get asked a lot of questions about converting white flour recipes, and you probably have them, and you can do that. Every recipe in my book was converted from white flour. And so if it says all-purpose flour, and people go, so what grain do I use? If it's yeast bread, you're going to use hard wheat. If it's not a yeast bread, you can really use anything, but soft wheat's going to give you a moister muffin, pancake, cookie, brownie, whatever. So that's your conversion. So you don't have to worry about what kind of white flour it's telling you to use. Is it yeast or is it baking powder? Yeast, hard wheat, okay? And we have two varieties, hard red and hard white. Ooh, my bag's gotten a little cloudy here, but I think you can see the difference. Well, here, let me just put these over here. So this is hard red, and this is hard white. This is for yeast bread making because it has a high protein content. Also, let me just tell you a little bit about how we sell grains here at Bread Becker's. The green label, you'll notice, as opposed to the white label, the green label is certified organic. The white label is what's called commercial or non-organically grown. We are very comfortable with our non-organic grains, but if you have any concerns, our organic grains are certified organic. But that's the differentiation. If you see a green label, it's organic. White label is considered non-organic. And just so you know, it is illegal in all 50 states to spray grain once it's in head with any type of herbicide or pesticide. Okay? So some things you may be reading are just not done routinely. Okay? Who knows what the big powers that be do, but yeah. So just so you know. So all of our wheat comes in by the semi-truckload. We have a grain elevator that he contracts farmers to grow our wheat for us, and he cleans it and sends it to us in what's called a tote. It's a big 2,000-pound bag, and we get it in by the truckload. So 45,000 pounds of wheat comes in, or grain, different grains come in at one time on the truck. Grains are storable. Left whole and intact, this grain is storable, just as nutritious today as it will be next week, next month, next year, 10 years from now, 3,000 years from now. Tombs in Egypt that were discovered that had grain in them, believed to be 3,000, 4,000 years old, when they planted those kernels of grain, they grew. So what does that tell you? It's still alive. But once you mill this into flour, all those oils and vitamins and minerals exposed to the air, oxidation begins to take place, and you start losing a lot, right, even in the first day. And then, of course, the flour will eventually spoil. The enemies of grain storage: moisture, bugs, rodents, okay? We have those very prevalently here in the southeastern United States. Well, actually everywhere, right? But especially moisture. So when the grain comes in, all of our grain gets packaged into a 6-gallon food-grade bucket with a lid that they pound on, and we package it with carbon dioxide gas. So, and we try within a matter of a few days to get all the grain packaged, because we don't want it sitting in our warehouse where it can be exposed to those grain moths that just are here in the air somewhere out there. I know you're out there somewhere. But anyway, moisture, it would attract moisture also in our warehouse. So it all gets packaged with carbon dioxide gas to ensure that if there's anything alive in there that we can't see, it kills it. It can't live in carbon dioxide gas. So we package it like that. Then when we want to, so this is how we prefer to sell our wheat in the 6-gallon buckets. It's going to be your most economical way to buy it. And you may be going, how much wheat is that? That's a lot of wheat. It is 42 pounds of wheat, and you may be thinking that you haven't even used the 5-pound bag of flour that you bought last Christmas, but you're going to start using it now because you're going to hopefully make everything, all your flour. So this is the cheapest way to buy, because, what did I just tell you? When that grain truck comes in, it all gets packaged here with carbon dioxide gas, and that's how we store it in the warehouse, and that's how we sell it. So when we want to package it down for you in a 1-gallon pail or a 2-pound bag, if you want to buy it that way, because there's some grains I don't want 6 gallons of. Millet, that's a lot of millet. We'll talk about millet in just a minute. So, but it all comes from those buckets. So we've had all the expense and the labor to put it in those 6-gallon buckets to carbon dioxide package everything. That's the biggest key too, before it goes into a pail or a bag. Okay, so it's come from there. I would not sit a baggie like this on your pantry shelf. I would put it into some other kind of container. The pails don't, well, I didn't even tell you about the other lid. These lids are very easy to get on and off, and they do have a little gasket up in here, and they stack very well. So if you do have a pantry, these are really nice if you want just 7 pounds. Most of the grains at 7 pounds will go in this 1-gallon pail. And the nice thing is you can bring these back in, your empty pail, and we can refill them for you. Yeah, so anyway, so those are your options, but it is considerably more expensive to buy it in the 7-gallon pail as opposed to the big bucket. Now, one more thing I want to show you. So the lid that we package it with is a lid that we pound on, and it has a tear strip. You tear that strip off, and you have to pry it off. And it might make you say a bad word because it's pretty hard to get off. So you need a tool. But early in our business, very first year, we found these Gamma Seal lids, okay? So you take the lid off that we package it with, and this is a 2-part system. You press this rim onto your bucket. There's a gasket up in there. There's a gasket here, okay? And it's threaded. So now you have a lid that you can screw on and off and go in and out of your bucket easily. It's important that each time you go in and out of your bucket, you close the lid nicely. So if you do that lid, you have to pound on to get it all the way down. You remember you're going to have to pry it off if you want to get it. So this just get it off. So this just makes it very easy and ensures that you will close your grain every time you go in and out of it. Because I'm going to tell you, and I'm guilty, around here I'll do the same. If I have a bucket over there that I've just opened and haven't put a lid on, I just kind of set the lid on top. That's not closed, just sitting there. It's not closed. So the Gamma lids make it very easy. The Gamma lids are $12. We have multiple colors. I think red on red wheat, white on white wheat. It's very nice. Blue on my soft wheat here. Red and black would be really nice, whatever. I just hope y'all don't do orange and white. That is disgusting. No orange and blue either. That's disgusting too. So anyway, once you, I'm sorry. Am I stepping on toes here? Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. Isn't that the way? Go Dogs. I see your shirt. Yeah. I was going to wear all my Bulldog garb, but we're filming today, so I was like, oh, well, okay. So, but Brad's taking, yeah, he's doing it. Anyway, sorry. Once you put this lid on, it's very difficult, if impossible, to get off. We don't recommend taking the Gamma lid off. This now just becomes your wheat canister. You do not have to buy a $12 Gamma lid every time you buy a bucket of wheat. Pour your new bucket that you buy into your bucket with the Gamma lid, okay? Eventually you might replace it, but this one's very old, and my bucket's at home. It's very old. So, and if you're a prepper and you're buying multiple buckets of grain and wheat or whatever, don't buy a Gamma lid for every single bucket you have in storage. Just pry that lid off one time and pour it into your bucket with your Gamma lid. Does that make sense? So, and then there's red wheat and there's white wheat. I think we talked a little bit about that. Red wheat is going to be your nuttier flavor. White wheat is going to be a milder flavor. The bread that you're going to have from the Pullman Pan is 2 parts red wheat, 1 part white wheat. That is my favorite mix. Brad's making garlic rolls for you today before he leaves. And I used all white wheat because it's a milder flavor. So I'll use white wheat for garlic rolls, pizza dough, focaccia bread, things like that I really want to taste the herbs, the spices, the seasonings. But red wheat is my favorite. I like the nutty flavor of it. And red wheat has a little more fiber, a little more cleansing, if that's your issue. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, you do. But so red wheat it's not that white wheat is not white flour, okay? So it has fiber, but the red wheat tend to have a little bit more, and if bowel issues and Things moving is more your complaint. I would go more with the red wheat, okay? And we have hundreds of wart stories. That was one of my first, in the first month, one of my children's warts went away, and I studied it. I knew it was the bread. I knew it was the vitamin E. Go on my podcast. I have multiple wart stories, and I have a teaching on how I knew it was the bread. And you may be going, okay, she's really weird. But when you have hundreds now, people will tell me all the time that their warts went away within a few weeks of eating the bread. And it's because of the rich food source of vitamin E that your freshly milled flour has. The red wheat seems to work more. Over the years, hundreds of wart stories, the few that would call and say, I've been doing this for 6 months and my warts, my child's warts hadn't gone away. Every time they were using the white wheat. As soon as they switched to the red, the warts went away. I don't know what else might be there because there is vitamin E and all, but that does seem to be something going on. All right, so yeast bread needs to be kneaded in a way, all right? Gluten, you've got to develop that gluten, that stretch, because that stretch is what traps the carbon dioxide gas that your yeast makes. Your yeast is a living organism. It feeds on the carbohydrates in your bread and in your grains, and it produces carbon dioxide gas. If you don't have that protein there, that gluten stretch, that's what traps that carbon dioxide gas and enables your bread to rise. Does that make sense? And that's why it's not a bad thing. God put it there because you're going to make bread, right? So, European breads, flour, water, salt, yeast. All you have to do pretty much, have you seen those recipes for no-knead bread? That's it. Overnight, you just mix that up. Overnight, with no kneading, you come back and it's nice and stretchy, right? Or even in a few hours, it'll be nice and stretchy. That's because that flour can fully hydrate if there's only flour, water, yeast, and salt. Americans like fluffy bread, right? People taste, every European that's ever tasted my bread says, that's not bread, that's cake. Because it's sweet, and it's fluffy, and it's moist. Because we put oil and honey and eggs and milk and butter in our dough. What that does is that oil then coats the strands of flour, those strands of protein, keeps them from hydrating so easily, so we have to knead our bread. We have to mix it and mix it and mix it and mix it to get that gluten stretch developed. Does that make sense? And that's also why you do cakes and pie dough and biscuits. You cut the butter in so that it coats those strands of protein so you don't develop gluten because you don't want the toughness in your biscuits or your cake or your pie dough. Does that make sense? I think it does. I see y'all nodding. So you can knead bread dough by hand very easily, but it might take some effort on your part. And so we have machines and tools now today that make it very, very easy. Very popular option is a bread machine or an auto bakery, if you want to call it that. We choose to carry the Zojirushi brand. Their symbol is the elephant because it's for strength. Zoji is a Japanese word for elephant. So this is a very durable, powerful, strong, long-lasting bread machine. Google it, you'll see. Zojirushi is going to come up every time as the best bread machine there is. We're still using ours from 1998. And it's just a beautifully designed machine. You'll see others out there. And if you have a bread machine that's not this brand, use it. It might die under heavy, heavy, heavy use. And, it might not make the greatest bread fully baked, but just use it to knead the dough. So start with what you have. A grain mill, of course, is the key. You need a grain mill. And if you don't have one, you need one. But you all may have a bread machine of some kind and a mixer of some kind. I'm just showing you our choices because of the durability, and you're going to start using these machines, so we want ones that last. That's why you don't see a lot of options for bread machines, because this is the one that can stand up under day in, day out, freshly ground flour bread. So this is a big 2-pound bread machine. This is their Virtuoso Plus. We do sell their other model that's a step down, does a great, great job. If you're going to fully bake your bread in here all the time, that's your main goal of your bread machine, I highly recommend stepping up to the Virtuoso Plus. What they did, they upgraded that model a couple of ways. They put handles here on the pan to be able to get the hot pan out of the bread machine once it's done, because you really want to get yeast bread out of the pan as soon as it's cooked and baked, because if you don't, it's going to sweat and get soggy crust there. The other thing that they did, which I thought was genius, the big complaint with a bread machine is to get the bread done. It has to get so done on the bottom to get it done all the way up to the top. So the Virtuoso Plus has a heating element in the lid as well as in the bottom. So it really, really, really does a beautiful, even job of baking your bread. They all have different cycles that you can choose from. Jam and jelly making, this one has a sourdough cycle, but honestly, I pretty much use it just for my yeast bread. But another option is it has 3 memory cycles. They're called homemade cycles, where you can program the machine to do what you want it to do. And I think in the southeastern United States, that's really important, because so your bread dough needs to be kneaded, yeast bread dough, to develop that gluten, but then also you've got to give the living yeast time to grow and produce carbon dioxide gas. So that can take a while. Yeast likes warm and moist. The warmer it is in your house, the faster it's going to grow. Colder it is in your house, the slower it's going to grow. You can put your dough in the refrigerator. It's still going to rise, just slowly. But if it's warm, it'll rise faster. So another big complaint with a bread machine, if you're stuck with just the factory defaults, that last rise before your bread bakes is the critical one. Whether bread machine or baking in your oven, that's the critical rise, okay? Because if it over-rises and then it starts to bake, what's going to happen is it's called oven spring. It's going to try to rise that last little bit of, yay, it's really warm, we like it. But what if it's over-risen, if it's risen to capacity, there's only so far a balloon can stretch, right, before it pops. Same with your gluten. So only so far it can rise. If it has risen to capacity and then starts baking, what's going to happen is going to collapse. So if your bread looks like a crater, like the Grand Canyon or whatever, or even if it's just a little like this, that means that last rise before it bakes is too long. If you're stuck with factory default, there's not much you can do about it. You can reduce your yeast a little bit, but then that's plain. But with the homemade cycle, you can easily go in there and go up or down on that time of that last rise before baking. And so that's really nice. And it has 3 memory cycles. And we have a whole little video on our YouTube channel of showing you how to set up that memory cycle. I have one that is everything's turned off but kneading, because a lot of times I use my bread machine, knead the dough. I want hamburger buns, I just knead them now. I want cinnamon rolls, I'm going to make donuts, I'm going to make bread to take to church, whatever. I just need the dough kneaded. So I have everything turned off. I don't need it to rise it. I don't need to bake it. One of the first cycles in your bread machine is it warms up the liquids. So if I just put everything in there warm, I don't need it to do that. So I have everything turned off but knead. Then I have a second memory that is the full thing. It's going to warm it up, knead it, rise it, punch it down, rise it again, bake it, and then click when it's done. And that's about 2.5 hours. So you're going to see how fast it is to put your ingredients in here. When people tell me that they don't have time to make bread, I'm like, maybe 10 minutes to load it in here, push a button, start, and come back to a baked loaf of bread. And here's another cool thing about the Zojirushi. It actually has a delayed time cycle, up to 13 hours ahead. So you could set it tonight, take 10 minutes before you go to bed, put some cinnamon and raisins in that basic bread dough, wake up tomorrow morning to a hot cinnamon raisin loaf of bread. Or today, before you go out to work, or this morning, load it up, come back to hot bread when you get home. So it's this, what I tell people when they try and decide between a mixer or a bread machine or whatever, use what you have if you have it, okay? But bread machine is really nice if you live a very busy lifestyle. And I know we all say that, but if you come and go a lot. For me, with my family, it wasn't as practical as the mixer. So, because one loaf, we ate that in one sitting, so it was like, oh gosh, I got to make another loaf of bread, So anyway, very, very nice bread machine. What you're going to do here, comes with 2 paddles, does a beautiful job of kneading the dough. You'll see how pretty it is. You're going to drop those down on those posts. You want to make sure it drops all the way down. The paddles will kind of stop part way down, but you just need to wiggle them just a little bit so that the top of that paddle is flush with the post. I don't know if you can see that from where you're sitting. So we're ready now to get all of our ingredients loaded into the bread pan. If you want to look, the very first page in your handout is the basic bread dough recipe. That is my favorite recipe. When I started, I had 5 children that I was homeschooling, had number 6 shortly after, and then number 7. And then we started our business and then started traveling. It had to be easy for me. So I found a bread dough, and I just kept tweaking the one I used until I found one that I really, really liked. And that's kind of where I landed. And I found that I didn't need multiple yeast bread recipes. I use that for pizza dough. I may cut out the honey and use that. I use it for donuts. I use it for cinnamon rolls. I use it for raisin bread. I use it for seed bread, garlic rolls. It's all the same recipe. All the yeast bread that you have today is that basic recipe. So it's very adaptable. Then I had muffins, pancakes, coffee cake, which you've already had pancakes and coffee cake. And those are stir up in 5 minutes and bake, or put them on a griddle. So those were easy. I'll tell you a story. So you'll hear it if you listen to the podcast this past week. My son, David, and on the podcast, you're going to hear what we call It's the Bread stories. Part of the reason I started the business and started just studying so much was people would call me. The first customer I had, she called me before 8 o'clock in the morning, and she went, "It's the bread, it's got to be the bread." And I'm like, didn't even know. And she goes, "This is so-and-so." And I made bread for her. And she said, "Sue, my cholesterol dropped 85 points in a month, and that is all I've changed, is I've added this bread to what we already eat." And she goes, "And my husband's Southern, and he decided he didn't like this, so I make biscuits for him, but after every meal, I have a cinnamon roll with cream cheese icing that you've made for me," because that was her favorite thing I made for her. 85 points in 1 month. And I'm like, how could that be? So, and she knew it was the bread. She goes, 3 doctors, 3 years, we've been trying to deal with this. Nothing has changed, and this is all I have changed. So I pull out my biochemistry books, and I find out inositol, choline, lecithin, vitamin B6. They're all the nutrients that our body needs to break down fats and oils so our body can use it and break down cholesterol. It's all in grains. It's all in the bread. And so that's why. And we have hundreds of those stories. And but one that really intrigued me, and my son shared it this week on the podcast. He played professional paintball, and him and one of my other sons and even my daughter played professional paintball. And I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with paintball. You shoot, who thought of this? An automatic weapon with balls of paint at each other. And you have some garb on to protect you, but usually on your back and your arms, just a jersey, and they do what they call bunker you. They come up on you and bow, 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 just blast you with these pellets that leave whelps and bloody marks. I always said if I ever had to take you to the pediatrician, they would, do y'all remember what a cigarette lighter is in the car? That's what it looked like, that I had just burned him everywhere with a cigarette lighter. Now these are 18, 19-year-old single boys, young men. One of them came up to my husband and said, "Is there something in this bread that would make your wounds heal faster?" And Brad goes, "Why?" And he goes, "Josh and David's wounds heal faster than all of ours." A 19-year-old boy noticed this from paintball scars. They would come back the next week to play, and theirs would be gone, and everybody else would still be oozing and infected or whatever. And David reminded me of that story. Wound healing, it's wonderful. So yeast likes warm and moist, so I'm going to use warm water. I have a water kettle that I like to heat mine in. It'll boil water, but it also has a variable temperatures here, and it will do 110. That is the perfect temperature for your yeast, so you don't kill your yeast, and it's the perfect temperature to help develop that gluten. So while my water's warming, you can use tap water, but if you use the hottest setting, you want to make sure you get that oil and honey and flour in there before you put your yeast in. So we're going to get our mill ready. Make sure your lid is on. Yep, I just about made a mistake. Yep, cup is on, lid is on. Connect it. So that basic recipe calls for 4.5 cups of flour, and that's where I've kind of landed when I make bread in the bread machine. The mixer, I'll adjust how much flour I need, but the bread machine, the wheat we have right now, seems to work very well with 4.5 cups of flour. So a cup of grain makes a 1.5 cups of flour. So how much grain do I need to mill for 4.5 cups of flour? 3, right? So I usually use a combination of 2 parts red wheat to 1 part white wheat. So when I'm making bread in the bread machine, I make sure my canister's empty. I mill 2 cups of red wheat, 1 cup of white wheat, and then I don't measure my flour after that if I'm doing it in the bread machine. So that makes it even easier. All right, you ready? I'm going to show you how fast it is to get bread in the bread machine. Turn the mill on. 2 cups of red wheat, 1 cup of white wheat. My water is already warm. So I'm going to get 1.5 cups of warm water. I also love my angle measurers. Notice I just look right down on the angle to determine how much my measurement is here. I start by putting my water in. Then I'm going to do my oil and honey. We use extra virgin olive oil here. It is imported from the Isle of Crete. Look how beautiful and green it is. It is some of the best olive oil you can get. To be extra virgin olive oil, it has to have a percent acidity of 0.8% or less, and ours is guaranteed, the Agrelia that we sell, to be 0.8 or less. Usually it's around 0.5, but we do have some that are 0.3. And the greenness of the olive oil, beautiful. Just clean my mill. And then all of our honey is raw, unpasteurized. It's from a family-owned honey farm. It's this 3rd generation now, and it's Weeks honey. And this is a bakery-grade honey that we're using. So I measure my oil first, and then my honey on top, and then that helps the honey to just slide right out of that measuring cup. Sometime with the angle on there, it doesn't slide out as good as from a glass measure, but I love the fact that you don't have to get down here to look at the side. When you're measuring out of a gallon jug of honey full, it weighs 12 pounds, and a 3-liter can of olive oil. So that makes it nice just to look straight down. So now we're going to use some salt, and we use Redmond Natural Mined Mineral Salt. It's unrefined. It's mined from the ground. So just going to put 2 teaspoons of salt in there. We're going to put our yeast in last. If you have an older recipe that you like that says to put your yeast in the water and soak it to proof it or let it soften, you don't need to do that with the instant yeast. We sell the Pullman instant yeast. It has a shelf life of 2 years once you've opened it, but you should keep it in the refrigerator, okay? So I open my yeast, I just put it in a jar and I keep it in the refrigerator and then just take it out when I'm ready to put it in. The other ingredient, I am going to use an egg. An egg will help make your bread softer, but you don't have to. It's totally optional. My original recipe was a Jewish challah bread recipe that used a lot of eggs, and I liked the texture of the crumb. And so even when I kind of got away from the pure challah bread recipe, I still added an egg. Totally, you can make great bread without an egg. Actually, this was the first. Usually I see people asking, how can I make my bread softer, more sandwich bread so it's not crumbly? I actually had a lady this week call and say, how can I make my bread denser? I'm like, wow, that is a first. I said, leave out the egg. Well, I already do. Well, then leave out the oil. So anyway, I'm going to just add an egg. And then another optional ingredient, totally optional, is lecithin. Lecithin is the nutrient that is found in any food that has fat. So it's in your grains, it's in eggs, it's in milk, it's in any food that has fat in it. God put this phospholipid called lecithin. It will bring your cholesterol down without putting it in there because it's already in your grains. But exactly what it does in your body, it does in food. It makes oil and water mix. That's why you'll see lecithin as an ingredient in a lot of different foods, salad dressings, mayonnaise, things like that. Reese's peanut butter cups, don't eat them to get the lecithin, just telling you. But that's what it's doing. It will do the same in your bread dough, but totally optional. In Tanzania and Haiti, where we've helped build bakeries, they don't put lecithin in there. They don't put an egg in there. They just make it plain, and we make delicious bread. But I'm telling you, if you try it, you'll notice a huge difference in the texture of your bread. So I use about anywhere from 1.5 to 2 tablespoons per recipe. And this is sunflower seed lecithin. I think lecithin gets a bad rap on the internet. If you Google it, people say, oh, it's so bad for you. It's probably because most of the lecithin used in the food industry is soy. from soy because it is the most predominant food source is soy. They're very high in lecithin, soybeans are. So I always go down my checklist. Let's go water, oil, honey, salt, lecithin, egg. Is that everything but my flour and yeast? So here's my flour that we milled. I'm believing it's 4.5 cups because I milled 3 cups of grain. Boom. Okay. And then I need yeast. And I'm going to do 1 tablespoon of yeast. I make a little indentation right here. And then I just put my tablespoon of instant yeast. You do not have to take the yeast out and let it come to room temperature. I just have it sitting here for ease. Okay, so I don't run to the refrigerator and get it. I do refrigerate both my yeast and my lecithin because it does have fat in it. So to improve the shelf life. The yeast you definitely want to refrigerate or freeze, either one. So when I open the package, I just pour it into my jar and keep it on the door of my refrigerator or my freezer, either one. So, and then I just put it right back in when I'm done. Let me pop this into the bread machine. You want to tip it slightly towards you. I'm sorry, I should pull it over a little bit. Tip it slightly towards you to snap it completely into place. Then we're going to shut our lid, and I am going to choose my memory cycle that is just knead. I don't need you to warm up the liquids. You know, if you're doing a time delay, yeah, you'll want that cycle on. But I just want you to knead this dough for me. So I've selected my memory, push the start button, boom, it's kneading, okay? Let's talk about optional gluten. I get a lot of flack about having that even on my recipe. So years ago, when we first started making bread, everything was going great. I had my recipe down pat. I used hard red wheat was all I knew in the first few years. Well, then 1993-ish, somewhere in there, came out this new variety of wheat, hard white wheat. Everybody was going, oh, this is so great. It's more mild in flavor. To me, it tastes like white bread. My white bread friends are like, no, Sue, it still tastes like wheat. But it was very mild, very light, very golden. And so it was all the rage. So we started buying it to sell. So we get like 5,000 pounds of it, and we bring it in. And year before we had gotten some. I knew how to make the bread. We get it in 1993, and it's like it was a goopy mess when I went to make my bread dough. Called the supplier, and he goes, oh, yep, it was a bad year of wheat, had flooding during the growing season. And so that made the protein content lower. And the protein content, those 2 proteins that form that stretch, is called gluten. So it wouldn't make bread dough. It wouldn't come together. It wouldn't form that stretch because of the rainfall during the growing season, which that's what I want y'all to understand. The whole thing about wheat being genetically modified, that is not true. They say it's genetically modified, so it has a higher protein content. What determines the protein content in wheat is rainfall in the growing season. You can take this hard red wheat and plant it out in your backyard. It will grow and it will produce wheat. But I bet you money it won't have high enough protein to be called hard wheat, even though you planted hard wheat seed. Does that make sense? So it was a bad year for wheat that year. Couldn't make bread with it. So in the food industry, what they will do is they'll take this wheat and they wash it. They put it in big vats and they just mix it and wet it and wash it until everything disintegrates but this stretchy, rubbery substance called gluten. Then they dry it and they powder it and they sell it as vital wheat gluten or pure gluten, okay? So that year I discovered that, and I had to add some to get that bread to make. I wish I had left it out of my recipes because I've never needed to use it since, and I really don't advocate adding extra gluten if you don't need to. Bread that you buy in the store, white bread, pure protein and starch, and they even add more of that pure gluten flour, or they don't call it flour in the food industry, and that's where it gets crazy. And that is very constipating, very hard on your digestive system. It doesn't move, and so it lays down your villas. Very detrimental. Adding a little bit to your bread dough to get a little more rise, a little more stretch, not too bad. I would never add more than what's there in the recipe, but I wouldn't add it at all. Yeah, and then even your 100% whole grain breads, read the label. 3rd or 4th ingredient is going to be gluten. They add it in the commercial industry a lot. Yeah, so you'll see that. A little trick you can do if you have children, take a little bit of wheat, just like a tablespoon, pop it in your mouth. Just kind of keep sucking on it till it gets soft enough to chew. Chew it and chew it and chew it. And eventually you'll be able to blow a bubble with it. Because you'll get it down to, you've disintegrated everything but those, ask me how I know. I have sons, and they used to have bubble blowing contests when we would go on trips with the wheat, because the wheat was in the car. And that's why it's in the recipe. It is totally an optional ingredient. I don't recommend adding extra. We used to sell it here, and now we don't even sell it. So, because you haven't needed it. And there's some other tricks I've learned since then where you don't need to add the gluten. All right? Okay, so that's our bread dough here. We're going to let this knead. And while that's kneading, we will move on to the mixer. Any questions on the bread machine? Okay, so her question is, if we're going to use the delayed time, do we use warm water in the beginning? I wouldn't, because it's probably going to cool off. You could, because it'll kind of get everything warm in there. But with the delayed time, I wouldn't worry about it, but I would make sure that first cycle, they now call it rest, where it used to be preheat. I would certainly make sure there's some time on that. 10 minutes is probably fine, where it just kind of warms the ingredients all up. Like I said, you can perfectly knead bread by hand, dough by hand. Will take you probably 10 or 15 minutes to get that good gluten development with just kneading and pushing. And I'll show you kind of the technique when we shape some dough in a little while. But I will say this, using a machine, it's going to knead the dough no matter how sticky it is. With your hand, you tend to keep adding flour so that it doesn't stick to your hand when you're hand kneading. And there are some great spatulas, I think, that you can use now to help prevent some of that. But I find that typically when I knead bread dough by hand, it's a little heavier, denser bread, because the tendency is to keep sprinkling with flour so that I can knead it. Whereas these guys, they're going to knead no matter how wet your dough is. And the Ankarsrum Mixer really does a nice job of kneading very, very soft dough. It will even knead dough that is more like a batter bread. It will develop the gluten because of the mechanism of the way it mixes. The Ankarsrum Mixer was designed by Electrolux of Sweden in 1940. And honestly, we've been selling this mixer since the beginning, since 1992. And it is by far, and we go to the International Houseware Show, we've looked at other mixers, it is by far, hands down, the finest mixer in the world. And it will hold up. It is built to last a lifetime. And so that's why we sell it as opposed to other mixers. We've looked. They're not going to hold up under lots and lots of mixing. When we started our business in 1992, I called the mill company that we wanted to sell, and they said, okay, that's fine. We'd love for you to be a distributor, but we do want you to purchase the 3 appliances that we sell so that you'll know, because we'll send customers your way. One was a dehydrator. I won't go into that story. I was like, I don't want to dehydrate. Only hippies dehydrate. Please, I don't want a dehydrator. Now I own a bunch of dehydrators, a freeze dryer, and I actually made a video for the company because I got so into dehydrating. But when they told me the capacity of this mixer, I was catering a wedding that weekend and had to make 800 rolls, I can't remember, with my KitchenAid mixer, which you can only make like one batch at a time. And I was like, how fast could you get that here? It didn't get here in time. But I boxed up my KitchenAid and I put it in the basement thinking, I might not like this, because I was a KitchenAid person. I've never taken the KitchenAid out of the box again. And I had a Hobart KitchenAid, just so you know. KitchenAid is not the same company that it used to be. Hobart was the commercial line. KitchenAid was the domestic line. You used to have to go to a Hobart store to buy a KitchenAid. It was made same quality. It was a commercial quality machine for your home. Small. I mean, it was, scaled down. And it was built to last. But in about somewhere in mid-80s, that Hobart was like, who needs a commercial mixer in their home in this country? Our home and lifestyle had come down to cake mixes, cookies, maybe bread dough every now and then, just to be cool, Most people just cakes and cookies. So they sold KitchenAid to Whirlpool, which I am fine with Whirlpool as a company, but they greatly cheapened the machine and it's just not the machine. You can call them. They will tell you. It's not designed to make bread dough day in and day out. If you have a KitchenAid, it will work. Start there. Do it. You don't have to buy a new mixer if you already have something, unless you just want to, and you can. What I tell people, it won't last as long as you were hoping. When it breaks, call me. Okay, I'll hook you up. So anyway, and when I found this and found the quality of it, the design of it is like nothing you've ever seen. And I really can't believe that somebody, I don't know how they protect it, that somebody hasn't imitated it. So anyway, large stainless steel bowl, I think it's 8-quart stainless steel bowl. Notice the shape of it. Who thought of doing a funneled shape bowl? Who thought of that? Crazy, because, and even some of the directions, stop the mixer, dig the ingredients up from the bottom. You'll never have to do that with this. Also, the motor is here. Who thought of this? And that's been around for a while. Even my mother's Oster mixer, you know, the beaters were here. Yeah. Scraper scrapes. Roller rolls. This is good for cakes, cookies, bread dough, everything. Spring-loaded arm. Shoot the pin down the center of that roller. See the wheel here? It rests up against the side of the bowl because there's no roller. I mean, there's no motor turning this. Watch this. Long detachable cord, which is a plus. Mine does not have a detachable cord, but my mixer doesn't leave my counter. And but that's nice if you do take your mixer off the counter and store it. And this is all you got to do to move it. Have you ever tried to move another brand? It's like, how do I grab that? So you might want to hug your Ankarsrum because it's so amazing. But but you don't need to move it. So one click is continuous on. Bowl turns, scraper scrapes, roller rolls, mixes cakes, cookies, kneads bread dough like your hand, goes over like this. Okay? So add ingredients while it's mixing without having to turn it off. And if it does collect some stuff right there in the center that it's not grabbing yet, it will eventually, but all you got to do, boop, and it's grabbed it, and that's it. So speed dial is here, so you can go all the way up to pretty fast. Bread dough, somewhere between 2 and 3 is what you're going to need that on. The only thing that you'll have to adjust to as opposed to the KitchenAid. KitchenAid, you can throw cold stick of butter in there and that beater will it'll whip it up. This you have to start with softened butter, okay? But that's the only downside that I had to get used to it. And once you know that you can do triple batch of cookies in here, yeah. So her question is, she had read that you have to change the way you put ingredients in there. I don't think so. I make bread dough exactly the same way no matter what type of mixer I'm doing. And even our commercial, when we had a bakery, we did it the same way. All the liquids, everything in there but the flour and yeast. Flour and yeast goes in last. So that's the way I've always made it, and even in the KitchenAid, that's the way I've made it. Cakes, you're going to do them just the same. You're going to cream your butter and sugar. Follow your directions. You cream your butter and sugar, and you add flour, milk, so that gluten doesn't develop, right? So, yeah, cakes, cookies, everything. I make the exact same way. Cream my butter and sugar for cookies. So clean up. There it is. And notice there is no center post to clean. There's no way anything gets out of this bowl and goes down in the inside of this mixer. And as you leave today, I encourage you, look to the right as you walk out and you'll see a 1950s mixer sitting there. You'll notice it's pretty much the same. They sleeked it up and have nice colors now. The roller and scraper used to be wooden. You'll see those. But everything has always connected to that bar through that slot, and the motor turns it. Okay, and even your attachments are going to turn the same way. So this is the basic unit, is the large stainless steel bowl. It does come with a dough hook. In America, I've never used it. My daughter is the Ankarsrum USA. She's with them, and she has learned and trained to use the dough hook. I never have. But this is the only thing the roller scraper mechanism doesn't do great is aerate. So for that reason, the basic unit does come with this very light-duty plastic bowl. A lot of people say, why is it plastic? I've paid so much money. Because it's for egg whites and whipping cream, you know. And so just put the post on. Again, it turns, the slot turns that. So you just drop the bowl on. This is for your egg whites, whipping cream, marshmallows, light-duty whipping, aerating, the balloon whisks. The single whips are for just a small 2 dozen batch of cookie dough with not a lot of raisins, nuts, chocolate chips in the kitchen sink. So just a basic cookie dough. I have done chocolate chip cookies in there. You just change it out. But this is your cake batter. I did the brownies in here yesterday, and so it's just easy. So the beater's turn. Yep. So that's your basic unit. The machine sells for $750 on the internet. That's the MAP price. In store, we take $50 off. And that's every day. So you're not like, oh, buy it today because you're here. No, it's every day in our store. It's $6.99. We can't offer it on the internet as that, but in the store. So this is the basic unit, and it comes in all kinds of beautiful colors. It's a real workhorse, I'm telling you. We started a ministry, Real Bread Outreach, in 2007. In 2016, God called us to Haiti to help feed some school children and an orphanage that the kids were basically going without food. So we went down there, taught 5 young men how to make bread, sent them a WonderMill. They have 2 WonderMills and 2 Ankarsrum mixers. Before COVID and then the riots and all of that, they were making bread for the school and for the children. 5, 6, sometimes 800 rolls a day. 5 young men. We sent them extra bowls. Lived in the orphanage, stored the mixers in a container. They would bring them up like this to the kitchen to make bread. We sent them extra bowls. They would do a triple basic recipe. Once that was done kneading 7 to 10 minutes, they would take that bowl off, drop another bowl on. The mixer would keep going. The shaper would roll the dough out, cut rolls, and that's how they baked bread. We put them there in 2016, teenage boys. They are Haitian boys. They are still making bread with those 2 mixers, and we've never repaired them. Kitchen schools that use the other mixer, they replace them all every year. King Arthur just changed out about 4 or 5 years ago now, I think it was, all of their KitchenAids to Ankarsrums, and now they've never had to replace them. So it's just a workhorse of a machine, and it's beautiful inside. I don't know if we still have the cutaway. I think we have a cutaway out there on display. It's a 1-inch flat belt drive, and it's a worm-driven transmission. It's built to last a lifetime, and mine is this ugly hospital gray. It still sits on my counter since because that was all they brought in at the time. Now we have red and blue and silver and black and yellow and all kinds. This is another cool thing. It was designed in 1940 when people made their own food. So rubber here on the knob, rubberized feet here, tip it over on its side. It's a motor. So you have your blender here. Now, I will say something about Ankarsrum. All of the attachments, no matter how old your mixer is, fit this mixer because they all run the same way with that slot, okay, and the bar, except they upgraded the blender in the last few years, and now this blender won't fit my mixer. It's the only thing that won't run on older mixers, but it's been around now for a little while. So you see the post here, it has the slot. You just match it up to the bar there, and you just slide it on. Oops, somebody tightened that down yesterday. And this is a slicer shredder, grate all my cheese. The lid for the bowl is the catch bowl for this. And this comes with 3 different size drums. It comes with a, this is the big slicer. I grated all the cheese with it yesterday. Has a slicing blade and then a smaller like Parmesan cheese grater. I use this a lot with my freeze drying and dehydration. It also, I have a whole drawer of attachments here. There's a flake mill attachment that you can roll your own oats, make your muesli cereal. Meat grinders, a commercial grade meat grinder. We sell a lot of those to hunters that'll grind their deer. Messerschmitt makes a lot of the attachments for the Bosch, for the Ankarsrum, for the KitchenAid. They're all made by the same company. This is your basic unit. The big bowl, the roller scraper, a dough hook, and that, and the lid. They redesigned the lid a few years ago. It used to just be flush, and so it only fit this bowl. It didn't fit this bowl, but now they've made it where it fits this bowl. When you're making butter, you can make butter in here. Just put your heavy cream in there and start whipping it, and once it goes beyond the whipping cream, it'll turn into butter, but then it gets real sloshy and starts sloshing the milk everywhere, so that's real nice. But marshmallows, everything, but no, this is it. okay? But it's a once-in-a-lifetime investment. All right, so what I want to show you today is a mixed-up dough in the Zojirushi. It could fully bake in here. The problem is, at the time I put it on, it wouldn't be done by the time we're hoping to leave today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called a cloche to bake the bread. I'll use the Emile Henri cloche today. We do have other styles. That's the Eureka. The Emile Henri cloche is the first cloche that I ever learned about. It's probably been about 10 years now. What I call a cloche, it mimics a brick bread oven, but I call it a total rule breaker. Because with bread dough, not only do you let it knead as bulk dough, and that's called bulk fermentation. And you can do that 1 or 2 times, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But once you shape that loaf of bread, it has to rise. So you have to at least have 1 rise, okay, before you bake it. If you don't, you're going to have a hockey puck or a doorstop or a brick or whatever. So 1 rise at least, and that's after you shape it, right before it bakes. But a cloche eliminates that whole process. And how it works, you preheat the base. And you may do this with a Dutch oven if you have that at home. I like the ceramic stoneware cloches because they capture more moisture than a metal pan. My son really loves we have, let me show you the Lodge. It's your preference. This is heavy for me, but he loves the Lodge. This is something called the combo cooker, and it's like $50. And it serves as a, as a stew pot. This can serve as a griddle to fry your eggs, but then it can serve as a Dutch oven, and you just preheat both, and you can cook your bread in here. This is another style with the Eureka. We have the big one. This one, it will cook a loaf. You can tell he uses it a lot here. And so I'm going to tell you how a cloche works, if you want to sit these back out of the way. But cloches are wonderful because they take away the need for rising before you bake it. And here's how. We're going to preheat the base. So I'm going to stick the base in this oven. I'm going to preheat it. And with a cloche, I usually cook it a little hotter. So I'm going to preheat this to 375. Come on, you can get there. All right. So what we're going to do, we preheat the base, and I usually do it while my bread dough is kneading and getting ready. So preheat it. Then we'll take the dough out. I let it rest just 5 minutes or so, maybe 10. And what happens then is I'll drop it right on the hot base, spritz it with some water, put the lid on, it goes in the oven without rising. The cloche, the lid and the pot or whatever you use, the enclosed, protects the dough from the full heat of the oven, but creates this very warm, moist environment that the yeast goes, happy dance, and they start growing and producing carbon dioxide. That bread rises very quickly. About the time then it reaches the full heat of the oven, the bake cycle kicks in. So you rise it and bake it all at the same time in the oven in 35 minutes. So it's pretty cool. I get it, but this is a getting started class. And you can have bread from milling to kneading to on the table in 1 hour. That's pretty amazing. I use this a lot when I bake every Wednesday night to take bread to church. If we're not having Mexican night or something, I usually take cloche bread because I can start it at 5, comes out of the oven at 6. I put the cloche in the car and take it to church, and we have hot bread on the table. Same concept work with La Creuset or the Lodge. Lodge now has enamel pans. Like I said, I like the stone unglazed finish a little bit better than some of the metal. I do like the enamel, like the Lodge and everything, Dutch oven for, especially if I add cheese and things like that into my dough, because it makes it really crispy and just very nice. Yeah. So you'll see. So I'm gonna let's get my bread dough resting a little bit here before I start mixing here, because once we mix here, we're going to take a little break. Are you ready to show the tortillas? Actually, hold that thought. We're going to show tortillas first, but we'll take our bread dough out. I'll move the bread machine here away. I recruited Brad to come in before he left for the game to do his famous garlic rolls and the tortillas. The tortilla recipe is not in your handout. I'm sorry, it is in the books. For so long, we didn't have tortilla makers, so I'd taken the tortillas out, and now I keep forgetting to put the recipe back in. But it is in my red recipe collection, and it is in the Essential Home Ground Flour book. In the red book, it is in the yeast bread section, though tortillas don't use yeast, but you need the dough to develop the stretch and the gluten, okay? The recipe in my book calls for 2 to 3 cups of flour. The secret to a good tortilla is don't get that dough too stiff. So I've found with the hard wheat, if you use hard wheat, rarely does it ever need more than 2 cups of flour. If you use soft wheat or spelt, some of those Kamut, they may need a little bit more, but just don't get that dough too stiff. And I'll show you how to determine that in the Ankarsrum Mixer, and even in your KitchenAid, you can figure it out. So once the dough is made, we just take it and make these little balls of dough. And I taught Brad this. He was doing it a totally different way at first.
She's so cool.
But I use a scoop, so I kind of pat the dough out a little bit and take the scoop and just put it over it, and just fill that with dough. And then there's my ball of dough, and that makes a nice 10-inch tortilla. I mean, it'll come all the way out if your dough is soft enough. Like I said, the key is a really, really soft dough, and because if you don't get it soft enough, it won't press out as thin. I've seen manual tortilla makers. I like getting away from electric when I don't need electric, but I'm telling you, having this hot presses that tortilla really, really flat and does a really nice job. It will completely cook the tortilla on the tortilla maker. You can go ahead.
Okay. How many people used to have a bacon grease pan next to their stove? Okay.
Ooh.
This is ours.
It's not bacon grease.
It's not bacon grease, but it's olive oil with Italian seasoning and garlic and then salt to taste. And the reason why we're using this right here is because I can do them 3 times as fast when I got another heating device.
The tortilla maker will completely cook it, the tortilla, once you press it. It just takes 30 to 45 seconds per side. So that means I'm only going to cook one every minute to a minute and a half. When I make this tortillas, I usually make a triple recipe. One recipe makes about 8. I usually do a triple to a quadruple recipe so that I have 24 to 32 tortillas. So I need to cook them as fast as possible. So just put my hot griddle next to the tortilla maker, and now you can see he's cooking 3 every minute to a minute and a half as opposed to 1. Why do I do that? If I have tortillas, we have food. We have some kind of meal. We can do a breakfast burrito, I can do a cheese burrito, I can do a sandwich wrap, I can do anything. And the tortillas store beautifully, and they'll slide right down in a gallon Ziploc bag, and they'll store in your refrigerator for several weeks without molding, because they're just so easy.
Olive oil and garlic are both preservatives.
Yes.
So they keep a long time in the fridge.
This olive oil, I called it my dipping sauce, was olive oil, garlic, and it is in your handout, the recipe for it, and that's just a suggestion. Brad does it way different. That was my version. But
I put a lot of garlic and a lot of Italian seasoning.
A lot of Italian seasoning, a little pinch of salt. Heat it up just till that garlic sizzles. Don't go any further than that. Take it off the heat and just let those flavors meld. And I'm telling you, just baste your rolls in it, fry your eggs in it, brown your ground beef in it, put it in your beans and rice. You know, if you cook rice, put a little of that in there. It's just nice to have on hand. So that's why, and he actually came up with this idea. We were doing a show, and we got down to the end of the show, and we had the olive oil sitting there and tortilla dough, and we were just trying to get done with everything before we packed it all up. So he just put the olive oil on the tortillas, and we were like, whoa, this just brought that up like to really delicious. So it just adds some flavor to your tortillas. All right, can you bring me the pail of refried beans? These are our freeze-dried, or not freeze-dried, dehydrated refried beans, fully cooked pinto beans and salt. They are dehydrated, they're storable, there's no oil or fat, and then all you do to make your refried beans, rehydrate them equal parts beans to water. And I'm low heat. They'll be just the creamiest, most delicious refried beans, 5 to 10 minutes on very low heat. You can bring your water up to boil on high heat first if you want, but then once you put those beans in there, turn it way down, because they'll thicken right up and they're ready to eat. So that is nice. Now, we sell a line of seasonings by it's a company called To Market. No salt, no sugar, no MSG in their seasonings, just dehydrated.
Another thing about the refried beans is it's only salt, water, and pinto beans, fully cooked and dehydrated. There's no oils, fats in it, so it will store a very, very, very long time.
Yep.
We do sell it in a 6-gallon bucket.
Yeah, we sell in a 6-gallon bucket, 1-gallon pail, and then the bag. So, yep. And then this, as a microbiologist, I have been teaching for years and years and years, long before it was in style. You can go back to some of my 1992, 93 teaching, all about gut organisms. Got to get those probiotics, fermented foods in there. So one of the things I discovered, of course, yogurt I always knew about, and but sour cream, although it's a cultured dairy, it's typically pasteurized, doesn't necessarily have live active organisms. So you can take your good yogurt, either your homemade yogurt or yogurt you buy in the store, just a good one, and that has live organisms, as broad a spectrum as possible, and you put it through a yogurt strainer, and you drain the whey off, and you do this overnight, and you'll have a sour cream texture, a thick now sour cream textured yogurt. And so this is what I used base of any of my dips. All the dip recipes on the market to market's usually equal parts mayonnaise to sour cream. So I just use the yogurt, and then this will be my sour cream on my refried beans or fajita burritos, however you serve sour cream. Baked potato, and it's delicious. There you go. Oh, come on, Brad. Brad wants you to know.
That's whey. No way.
There you go. He won't be here all day, so he's got to get it in fast. I typically use organic Stonyfield whole milk. You want to use whole milk. Don't buy the no-fat stuff. It's nasty and it's not good for you. So I use whole milk. Rarely do I buy sweetened yogurt, but sometimes as a treat, I'll do the strawberry Stonyfield whole milk yogurt and strain that and then use that as a bagel spread. It's very delicious. Yeah. But I like a new brand that I have found, Icelandic, that's it. Yes, the closest thing to Greek, real Greek yogurt. The stuff that's labeled Greek yogurt in the store. We went to Greece last year with our olive oil salesman. Oh my gosh, you've never tasted yogurt until you taste it. Whole milk, sheep's milk yogurt. So, so very delicious. Okay, I'm going to take my dough out of my bread machine pan here and just shape it and let it rest just a little bit. I used not to do this. I used to just shape it, put it right in the cloche, and it rose nicely. But one day I shaped it, got a phone call or something, forgot, and came back and dropped on, and it rose almost like twice as much. I'm like, well, all right, if I let it rest just about 10 minutes, it rises even better. Or maybe not even 10 minutes. It was short. So I'm just going to fold my mat here in half because I don't need the whole thing. This is a silicone rolling mat that I really, really like. And I like to use oil. If my dough is not super sticky, the oil works really nice, and that way I don't have the tendency of working a lot of flour into that dough. But also, it's just easier to clean up, I think, than all the flour. So, but sometimes I get the dough a little too sticky. But this looks really nice. So what you want to do when you take your dough out of the bread machine, always pull those paddles off. You want to wash the posts and everything. You know, there are a few customers over the years didn't know to pull those paddles off after they seeded them the first time. So they just kept kind of washing around them, and eventually that water will just make that flour like harden and glues those paddles on your post. So, yeah. And so what I usually do at home, I'll set this over in my sink, fill it with water. Super easy to clean then once I'm done shaping my dough. So, all right, this is beautiful dough. It's not too stiff. Look at how loose this dough is. Softer dough means softer bread, okay? But here is, see that? You see how it stretches? That's gluten. Gluten. Wow. God knew we needed it. So I'm going to divide this into thirds. Just, I kind of discovered it when I first started cooking with the cloche. I would kind of just fold this and make a nice big boule artisan loaf of bread. But then when I take it to church and we go to cut it, when you got to the middle, you know, that middle piece was like this wide. So I started cutting it into thirds. First time I cut it in half, and my kids, do you have teenagers? They're going to tell you what it looks like. Looks like a little butt crack. But anyway, so I started cutting it in thirds or fourths, depending on how big you want the little rounds to be. And I actually love doing this because they'll break apart easily once they bake. And then, like, especially if I'm having company, I have some bread boards that I'll set around the table with their own knives. And so every 2 or 3 people have their own bread to cut instead of having to pass it all around the table. You'll see what I'm talking about in just a minute. So, yeah. So I'm just going to weigh them so that they're all about the same weight because they're going to bake in the cloche. So I want them to be all the same, you know, roughly the same size. Okay, they're all the same size. All right, so now to shape my loaf, I just kind of shake it out, you know, kind of stretch it a little bit. And then I do what you might call a stretch and fold. I just stretch and pull it up over. Turn it a quarter turn, stretch and pull it up over, turn it back, stretch and pull it up over. Then when I get here, I just roll it with my hand and then bring it and round it with the cups of my hands. So that's a nice little round free-form loaf there. And if you were kneading by hand, it's kind of the way you knead is by pulling it, pushing with the palm of your hand. But I'm just going to pull this up into a ball. Getting those air bubbles out. All right, just pull it, stretch it up and over, up and over, up and over, up and over to a ball. Cup it. Okay, all right. So I'm just going to set it aside, and then we're going to mix up our bread dough. Y'all are eating the beans and tortillas? How you like it? Yeah? If I have the tortillas, that's what I'm saying. If I have tortillas and I've got the refried beans, we're talking 5 minutes. And what I love about having them in bulk like that, you can make as much or as little as you need. If I only want some for me, I'll just do like a little quarter cup, you know. And they're just so fast and easy to have on hand. And they're actually delicious even without the seasoning in there, but the seasoning does kind of make them nice. Our bodies need fat. We need fat. One of the worst things that's ever happened is the whole low-fat craze. Our bodies need fat. Dilemma is we're not eating the foods to help break down those fats to get into our cells. What are those foods? Grains and beans. So we've kind of gotten away, whole grains and beans. So the problem is with low fat, they've pulled it off, but now to get the consistency and the flavor, they usually have to add chemicals back into it. So, and then even homogenization and skimming milk, they break those fat particles down into something that you can't absorb now. So that's kind of my thinking there. Most of the time when it says low fat, if you read the label, it's typically got a lot of chemicals in there to give it the consistency it needs, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Did that answer?
So eat high fat and eat bread.
Yes, so yes, because that's the thing. Yes, put butter on that bread. Oh, listen, when we went to Greece, so we went with our olive oil salesman who is Greek. We stayed in his brother's home who lives there in Greece. It was a big fat Greek experience. I'm just going to tell you that. It was amazing. We visited the olive oil farm where our olive oil is made and went to their plant and watched some 5th generation company. Cretan Mills is what it's called. Olive oil industry is a very disreputable industry, so we got to go and see firsthand. They test all of their olive oil, and like I said, to be extra virgin olive oil, it has to meet an acidity requirement, and so they actually test there in their facility. Years ago, we sold an olive oil that was labeled extra virgin cold pressed olive oil. That was on the label. We had it tested. It had less than 1% olive oil. The powers, it's a corrupt industry. The powers that be, they pay the fines if they get caught, but no one shuts them down. I hope things are going to change maybe in the next few years. No one shuts them down, and they just keep doing the same thing. So we know what our olive oil is, but one recommendation I say is you can get good olive oil out. Just try to buy an olive oil that's bottled in the country of origin. The problem is when it comes into this country, nobody follows them back to the plant, and they mix it with cheaper oils. I know that wasn't your fat question, but we need, I know why I was going there. Also, our infused oils and vinegars, they start with extra virgin olive oil. The owner of that company is one of only 12 olive oil tasters in the world. It's kind of like a wine sommelier. And she tastes the olive oil. She can tell you where it's from just by tasting it. She tastes it all. They test it to make sure it is truly extra virgin olive oil before they infuse them right there in their plant with all natural ingredients. So we're very comfortable with that as well. But one of the things that was so amazing to me, I hardly saw any what I would call obese people in Greece, and every meal is 2 hours long, at least. Brad came up with a great saying. In America, you usually go to dinner and a movie, dinner and an event, lunch and a football game, or lunch and whatever. In Greece, the meal is the event. You go to eat and you fellowship together, and they bring the recipes out or whatever you've ordered as they make them. And it was just delicious, but it was such an amazing time. But one of the things that I was going to tell you is I asked one of the ladies, one of the families, she was kind of our host for the weekend. I was like, well, so how much olive oil does the average Greek family eat in a year? Are you ready for this? 183 liters. This is 3-liter can. Divide that by 3, and you're talking 61 liters of olive oil a year. That is more than a 3-liter can a week. They use it everywhere. They cook with it. They pour it on their salads. They pour it on their hummus. They pour it on their yogurt when they serve you. They have olive oil candy. They have olive oil cake. They have everything is with olive oil. And they eat that much in a year, and I didn't see any fat people. It was pretty amazing. Yeah. All right, I think this is rested enough. I want to go ahead and get it in the oven so we can take a little break here. You can see they're already rested a little bit and kind of getting lighter and airier. So now I'm going to just take a really sharp knife and just score it. There's some science behind scoring. You'll hear people talk about scoring to let the air out, where you control where it rises. But honestly, if you research the history, that is true. If you research the history, though, years ago, not everybody had ovens in their home. When you used wood for your oven, you didn't want to crank that oven up and burn that wood to just bake some bread. So there were communal bread ovens. And so people would take their loaves down to the communal bread oven. They would score it so they would tell their loaf from your loaf. They didn't want your stinking loaf of bread. They wanted theirs. I'm sprinkling it with what we call an everything bagel. I think we sell it. We sell the components. It's equal parts minced garlic, minced onion, poppy seed, sesame seed, and then the can that has the top that has big enough holes to let those through. But anyway, in Germany, the person that kept the communal oven clean and hot was called the Becker. So it's a German name. All right, so now we're going to bring our cloche out. It's hot. So this is our hot cloche. I'm just going to pick up the little balls of dough, place them gently on my hot cloche. You can drop them down into the pot if you're using a Dutch oven pot. Now, the hardest thing about using a cloche is to remember the base is hot. I'm going to spritz because this works very well with water. Put my lid on. Like I said, you just picked up the cold lid, so you got to remember how hot that base is. Like I said, I do 375 on the cloche, and I go ahead and do about 35 minutes. You're going to go ahead and give them garlic rolls?
Should we serve them hot?
Sure.
Hot or cold?
Hot. Do you even have to ask? All right, but you need to pay attention because you're going to eat those and you're going to go, oh my goodness. It's usually the favorite thing we serve here. Did you like the tortilla and the refried beans? Yes. All right, I'm going to get some water, more water in my kettle to get my water heating. So go back to that basic recipe if you're not there. And here's the nice thing about the Ankarsrum mixer and why it worked for me as opposed to a bread machine when my kids were all at home. The Ankarsrum, even though it's the largest non-commercial mixer sold in the world, the Ankarsrum will do a single recipe. So oftentimes when you get big mixer, you can't do a small amount. It'll do one recipe. It'll do a double. It'll do a triple. It'll do a quadruple. I don't like to do a quadruple. That's more bread dough than I want to work with and that my oven at home will handle. But a triple is my day in and day out. That's what I do. And when my kids were at home, I did 6 loaves of bread twice a week. And that's what we ate on. And what I loved was I had a basic bread dough. I would make hamburger buns out of some of that. I'd make loaf bread out of some of that. I would make cinnamon bread out of some of that. Cinnamon rolls out of some of it. You know, just depended on what I wanted to do for the week. So that was the nice thing about having a big mixer where I could make a big batch of bread dough. Then I was done. I had every meal taken care of for 2 or 3, 4 days. Now, interspersed with all of that was muffins, was pancakes, was coffee cake, was whatever, biscuits, cornbread. You had a question. So her question is, if you didn't want to bake all of it, you wanted a hot loaf of bread. And I actually had a lady that she had this mixer, and she bought the bread machine because she said, we like the bread hot, so I want to just make it fresh every day. But you could do that and put it in the fridge, take it out. Yes, within reason. If you left it too many days, it would still ferment and get kind of alcoholic tasting. But what you can also do, and I go over this more at the end of the class, but I'll answer you now. You can take that dough and shape it, put it in the pan, wrap it really well or put it in a bag and freeze it. And then take it out the night before or the morning of if you want a hot loaf for dinner. And then it'll thaw and rise in 8 to 10, 12 hours. And that's what I do. And I usually explain that when I'm rolling out the dough. Christmas time, our Christmas morning breakfast, we do a big breakfast grits, and Brad makes barbecue omelets, and we have cinnamon rolls. I don't want to make cinnamon rolls Christmas Day. I don't want to reheat them. So sometime the week of Christmas, I roll out my cinnamon rolls, cut them, and did I tell you how many children I have? So Christmas morning is a lot of folks. So I have an industrial, like, chafing dish pan that I make them. So I make them in that, cut them, and don't let them rise. As soon as you cut them, put them in the pan, they go in the freezer. Now they need to be covered so they don't freezer burn. So I use a white, unscented, unused trash bag. So I put it in there, close up, put them in the freezer. Last thing I do before I go to bed Christmas Eve, take them out of the freezer. They thaw and they rise overnight. I bake them in the morning and have hot, fresh cinnamon rolls. The dough, the yeast, I don't know what they do to frozen bread dough in the store that makes it last so long. I've found a week, maybe 2, is about as good as to get the best results. So only about 2 weeks in the freezer. Once the yeast starts working, it displaces the oxygen with carbon dioxide, so your nutritional value is loss is minimal. Nutritional loss is minimal because oxidation stops. And the same with once the bread is baked, the nutritional loss is minimal. Do I ever mill a large amount of flour and save it for later? Not intentionally. No, the key is mill the flour, make the bread. Mill the flour, make the muffins. Mill the flour right when I'm ready to use it, because oxidation begins as soon as you mill the flour. We've never had our bread tested to see how much loss, happens in storing it in the refrigerator, the freezer, or whatever. If I mistakenly mill too much flour, but I rarely have any leftover flour, and I'll save it and I'll use it somewhere else. But rarely do I intentionally mill the flour. You saw how easy it is, and if I'm going to make dough, I might as well just mill the flour right then. Now we go camping. Don't have electricity to take my mill. So yeah, I'll mill up and make up pancake mix and things for us to make camping. Same with on vacation now. If we drive somewhere where I can take my mill and mixer or my mill and bread machine, typically, it goes with me, and I mill flour and make pancakes and stuff like that. So her question, is can you mill it, vacuum seal it, put it in a Mylar bag with an oxygen absorber? I have said yes, but now you still may be losing. I don't know. But just in the last week or so, maybe 2 weeks, I've run across some articles that are saying you should not vacuum seal flour because of some chance of some organism being in there and causing issues. But I've got to look into that a little bit more, because that was news to me. I was like, what? You know, vacuum sealing or putting it in the jars and sealing it with a vacuum sealer. So Google it. Let me know if you find out anything legit. That's the problem. Google, you can love and hate it. You got to keep digging till you find something legit. You want to let your loaves of bread cool, and then I store mine. We have plastic bread bags, and I know a lot of people want to get away from plastic, but for me right now, or there might be storage containers. I think there's some that make bread containers, but I use plastic. You just want to let it cool, and I like our bags because they're big. They will hold even a bread machine loaf, a tall bread machine loaf. I've got 3 loaves of bread in one bag over there today. So, and they're a thick enough mill that it freezes very well. So you just want to let it cool before you bag it. Once you bag it, freezer or room temperature. Refrigeration temperature biochemically dries your bread out. Now, if you got meat and cheese in there, something that needs to be refrigerated, of course, refrigerate it. But for your basic bread, you don't want to refrigerate it. You just want to freeze it. The Ezekiel bread, yes, you have to refrigerate. But so that's how I store it. I know there's some cloth bags. There's beeswax bags. Everybody's, getting away from plastic. Those work pretty well with sourdough bread that has that hard crust. But if you try to store this soft bread in one of those linen bags, it's going to dry out. Just because I tried it. Yeah. The sourdough bread, yeah. Because of that hard crust, it does pretty well. All right, let's mix up some bread and take a break, because we got a long road to hoe. Yes, y'all like the garlic rolls? Yes, now you know why I recruited him. I can make them. I mean, I'm the one that taught him how. He doesn't like me to tell you that. But I'm the one that came up with the recipe, but he really has gone above and beyond. I will tell you how his secret, because he has recipes are just suggestions, and Brad has taken that and just made it 100 times better. All right. Roller scraper. Scraper goes here. Roller goes here. Let's see if my water is still warm. There we go. All right. Pull the pin up. You want to start with the roller up against the side of the bowl, because the bowl is going to turn the wheel that rests there. The bowl is going to turn that roller. There's no mechanism, no motor turning here. So now we're going to get all of our liquid ingredients in first. So while my water is heating back up again, I usually start with my water. I'll go ahead and do my oil and honey. So I'm tripling the recipe. 1/3 cup times 3 is 1 cup of oil. To tell you how reputable this company is, Cretan Mills, last year after we visited, we have a line called Agrelia, and it is guaranteed to be 0.8 or less, and it's usually around 0.5. The lower the number, kind of the better. So this one is 0.2 on the label, okay? And it has been a great olive oil for all these years. When we came home from Greece last year, our olive oil salesman called us and he said, it was a bad year for olives, and that's why olive oil pricing went way up. I just read it's a bad year for chocolate. Chocolate prices are going to go up this year worldwide. So, yeah, anyway, sorry, I digress. But so they called and said, they can't get any O2 oil. They can't get any oil to test that low. The lowest they can get is 0.3. Are you okay with that? And we'll have to make a whole new can because we can't put O3 oil in the O2 can. So that just tells you how reputable the company is. But notice how green and bright that olive oil is. If your olive oil is yellow, that means it has oxidized. And I'm going to tell you one other little thing. There's some advertising out there about a high polyphenol oil. I learned this when we went out to Olive Valley and visited them. She said, yeah, we test our olive oil for polyphenols and it's very, very high. She said, but to put that on the label is very deceitful because it diminishes once you bottle the oil. It diminishes over time. So she said, it might have that when they press it, but it's not going to have that much that they're claiming. So just a little thing out there, because there's some people out there talking about their polyphenol content of their olive oil, that it's the highest of anybody. So you tell that to a Greek. Every fenced-in yard had olive trees in it. It was crazy. And in fact, we visited our olive oil salesman, his mother's house, and she sent him home with olive oil that they had just harvested from their plants. So, all right, so third a cup of oil, third a cup of honey times 3. So that's a cup of oil, cup of honey. I'll just go ahead. Usually I like to put my water in first because it warms up the bowl. And the cold metal bowl gets nice and warm, and the water starts cooling down, creates a very warm, humid environment in this mixing bowl, which yeast loves. So that was 2 cups, 4 cups, and a half a cup. Okay, most yeast dough recipes give you a variable amount of flour. With the bread machine, I kind of trial and error first couple of times, new bucket of wheat. Your wheat's going to vary from bucket to bucket, from harvest to harvest. So you have to kind of determine how much flour you're going to use in that recipe. And even traditional white flour recipes, they usually say 5 to 5.5 cups of flour, something like that. So with a dough hook mixers, they tell you to add the flour until it pulls away from the side of the bowl. Because a dough hook needs, by grabbing that dough and stretching it, grabbing and stretching, that's one way to develop that gluten. But with that method, you need a little stiffer dough for that dough hook to be able to grab. So you're going to add the flour till it pulls away from the bowl. But the Ankarsrum mixer, you're going to see, it's pushing the flour up against the bowl. So how am I going to determine when I have enough? And that's my lecithin. I'm adding 2 tablespoons per recipe, roughly thereabout, anywhere from 1.5 to 2. 1/8 of a cup is 2 tablespoons, so I just use that, scoop whatever comes in there. If it's full, it's fine. If it's not, it's fine. So that's my lecithin. So how do I determine when I have enough flour in with this mixer? We're going to do that by adding our flour. The dough is going to start creeping up the back of the bowl. We pull it in. There's a little notch here for your finger. You pull the roller in. You lock the roller away from the side of the bowl. It now is not touching the bowl. The dough is going to now start turning that roller. Then you add flour until when you pump this roller into the center several times and back and hold it, the dough leaves the side of the bowl and moves into the center and looks like a big bagel. I explain that now. I'm about to show you, because if I take the time to explain while I'm showing you, the dough will start developing the gluten and it'll get less sticky and it'll pull in even if I still need more flour. Does that make sense? So once you start this process, you want to go with it. Okay, so if you need to answer the phone in the middle and you've already added half, turn your mixer off and just let it sit there and then come back and do your test. Because if you don't, it's going to pull away faster than it should and you won't have enough flour. It'll be really, really sticky dough. So I'm going to turn one click is continuous on. If you turn past that, you engage a timer. So a lot of people call and go, my mixer keeps turning off. And it's because you slightly turned it beyond that one click. And so now it's a timer and it'll turn off. So one click is continuous on. I always check my ingredients: water, oil, honey, salt, lecithin. I didn't put my eggs in. And again, totally optional if you don't want eggs in there. My daughter used to raise chickens and she's like, nope, and she sold them. She goes, eggs are money, not putting them in there. Or if you have an egg allergy, you can make great bread without eggs. But in America, we really want soft, don't we? We want that sandwich bread. Nothing like a tomato sandwich on a nice soft piece of bread. All right, so now I got everything in there, and that's why I always go down my list: water, oil, honey, salt, lecithin, eggs, flour. Now I just start adding my flour. And I milled about 12 cups. I think I added a little extra that I had left over from Muffins. I did the white second, so now I'm getting down into the red. Okay, I can turn the speed up just a bit. Okay, when I get about half my flour in there, the liquids have all cooled down enough and I know they're perfect, I go ahead and add my yeast. I'm going to do 3 tablespoons of yeast because it's a triple recipe. And just so you know, you don't need bread machine yeast. You don't need rapid rise yeast. This is the same. It's all the same. So rapid rise yeast, it has more yeast in that package. So if you need your dough to rise faster, just put a little more yeast in there. If you want it to rise slower, like if you wanted to put it in the refrigerator and hold it, I'd probably put a little less yeast in there. All right, see what it's doing? It's climbing up the back. It's a little thumb hole here. Of course, you'll be over there. So there's a little place for you to pull. Pull that towards you, lock that. This knob locks the roller away. I'm going to just take my spatula. Just pull that down. Now this is where you want to keep going. Pull it in. It's not pulling away. Do you see? And you can kind of tell that that's awfully liquid. But if you calculate the flour needed in this recipe, according to the recipe there, it should be 13.5 cups of flour. But if you can make your dough soft with good integrity, then you're going to have a softer bread and a bread that stays soft longer. Okay. Did you see what that just did? It's pulling away pretty quick. I'm going to add just a tad more. All right, watch. Okay. You see, you want it to come right away. It was kind of thinking about it, and I just added a little bit more. See what it's doing? Now you're going to look at that and you're going to go, that is a wet, goopy mess. Two things are going to happen. As it kneads, it's going to get less and less sticky. The bran, the fiber in this dough, is going to absorb that water while it kneads. And then also, as it kneads, it gets less and less sticky. So you just got to believe. You're going to look at this and think, that is too wet. Surely I need to add more flour. And if you keep adding flour till it looks like what you know bread dough should look like, you're going to have a very, very stiff dough. Can still make great bread, but if your bread is dry the second day or really dry the third day where you're going to only use it for toast, you've got too much flour. No matter what mixer you're using, try to back off the flour a little bit. Softer dough, softer bread, bread that stays soft longer. Okay? Wonderful thing about the Ankarsrum, once I know I've got enough flour in there, I'm going to engage the timer. A single recipe I usually do about 4 minutes, a double recipe about 8. And a triple recipe, I go all the way to 12. It's somewhere around 12 or 13 minutes, okay? Basic list of getting started items is all the way in the back of your handout. Highly recommend, if you can afford, a bucket of red, a bucket of white, and a bucket of soft. That would be my starting place. But for 3 years, I think I only used hard red wheat. So, depends. If you're going to make lots of cakes and cookies, soft wheat is your go-to. Breads is going to be your hard wheat. All right, do y'all remember how tiny the little balls of dough were? Let's see. Got a little done because I didn't push start on the timer. But that is beautiful. Perfect. 200. That's not too bad. Good. Because I was like, why is that not moved? Oh, well. So now you see they'll break apart easily. And now you have more of a sandwich size loaf if you even wanted to make it this way. It's really, really delicious. We're going to serve this at the end of the class. After they cool, we'll serve it with some of our, this is another line of seasonings that we have here, Salt Sisters. This is our bread dipping herbs. So you just sprinkle it on plate, pour your olive oil over. It's very delicious. Look at the difference in the dough, what it looks like now. I think you can even tell. It's got like ribbons, it's smooth, it's shiny. Most bread recipes will say knead until it's smooth and elastic. Do you remember how lumpy it looked, almost like cookie dough? Now it's very smooth looking. So if I'm around when my mixer goes off, when my kids were all young, I was somewhere in the house doing laundry probably. They would come to me because I would just let it turn off and I didn't think about it again until one of the children said, Mom, you have a bread dough waterfall. It would rise and be out the bowl. But now I'm a little more with it. So I usually try to, hang on, I want to show you something. I usually try to remove the roller scraper and then I'll put the lid on so now it creates a nice warm environment. You don't have to cover bread dough. It'll be fine. Most of our homes are not drafty and cold. and that was the main reason you did cover it. But even still, it will get kind of crusty if your house is cool or dry from the heat or air or whatever. So I do try to take the roller and scraper out. I want to make this point with the Ankarsrum mixer, and I think it's something I have neglected to teach, and even my daughter that teaches Ankarsrum mixer use, we've all been not as good about explaining this. So when you lock the roller away from the side of the bowl, it can't go up against the side, but it can still go into the center. So now, though, I need to take the roller out. I need to get this arm back, right? So the way to do that, you have to disengage this knob. The mistake people make is they go to unscrew it. It will not unscrew. They force it and it strips the threads. You have to disengage it. You pull the arm towards you, totally disengages. Okay? And I've noticed that I don't explain that. I just come in and take the roller out because you just kind of do it. Now, look, you're going to think that is awfully loose dough. I'm telling you, it's really nice. This looks like beautiful dough. I love this little spatula, but I will say this is another just the creativity of the Ankarsrum. This is the spatula it comes with. And they see the little notch, it goes right down each of those grooves and gets all the cake batter and cookie dough or whatever off. But I gravitate towards that little spatula because I absolutely love it. When they first sent us one, I thought, oh, that's cute, I'll never use it. Yeah, I have 4. Yeah. So, and then I just pull the scraper out. Okay, and then I'm just going to cover this and let it rise, and we'll come back to that shortly. So before we leave yeast bread, I want to talk to you about Ezekiel bread. There is a recipe in either one of my books, the Red Book or the Essential Homegrown Flour Book, for the Ezekiel bread. Years ago, I read a book called God's Recipe. The lady felt like she got the proportions, the Lord gave her the proportions of the grains and beans listed in Ezekiel chapter 4 in the Bible, verse 9. God tells Ezekiel, take wheat, spelt, barley, millet, lentils, and beans and put them into one vessel and grind them, make a cake out of them. Now, I doubt he had a handy-dandy plastic bag like this. Might have wished he had, but anyway, we don't know too much of the particulars, except this was the time where he was to lay on his left side for so many days, his right side for so many days. If you add it up, it's like 463, I think is right. Praying for Israel and praying for Judah. He was to eat an 8-ounce cake of this Ezekiel mixture at a set time every day with a quart of water. To our knowledge, we don't know if he was eating anything else, don't know who was making it for him. But anyway, years ago, I read this book, and she felt like God had given her the proportions, and she developed a recipe. It is the recipe from that book that is in my book. The book is now out of print, and I think I had lost it when I wrote my book, or I would have given her credit. And I recently found it, just like in the last year. And anyway, so we package it in this bag. So if you go to my book, the Red Book, and I'm not sure, I don't remember what page it is in the Essential Homegrown Flour book, but in the Red Recipe Collection, you will see it's called a fasting bread just because it appears that Ezekiel was fasting. Many people that do a fast, they'll maybe do an Ezekiel fast where they eat an 8-ounce cake, piece of this bread and a quart of water, and that's what they have. It's great if you have blood sugar issues or medical condition where you can't go completely without food, and so this makes a nice fast. She talks about it in her book, seeing great physical healing during that time. So anyway, so we call it a fasting bread, but it's one of my favorite breads for breakfast. I eat it toasted with my shake or my cup of cayenne hot chocolate, and I'm good for hours and hours. So it's very delicious just by itself. So this, it's the only recipe in my books that is grains. The measurement is grains, not flour. Everything else is flour, and it usually says freshly milled flour. This one is the grains before it is ground. This listed right here, 2½ cups of wheat, 1½ cup of spelt, 1/2 cup of barley, 1/4 cup of millet, 1/4 cup of lentils, 2 tablespoons of Great Northern, Red Kidney, and Pinto. That is what's in this bag. And we sell it like this. That is one recipe. You can mill all of this into flour. You will make the recipe exactly like it says, so you don't figure out if it's enough. Just dump it all in. It's a batter type bread. So you're not going to shape it like we're going to do in a little bit with this dough. You kind of pour and stretch it into the pans, and it makes 3 medium loaf pans. Okay, so it does give you directions, I think, for spreading it out into like a brownie pan and cooking it more like a cake. You can do that as well, especially if you want to fast with it. That's easier to portion it out. So that's the recipe. Now, I love the bread. In the early days, I never wanted to serve it when we were out doing shows and I was teaching people, because I was like, I don't want them to think that whole wheat bread is this heavy, dense bread, because it is very heavy. You're about to have it, but it's very sweet. It's got a lot of honey in it. It's very satisfying. I mean, you think an 8-ounce cake, I did the fast, I've done it several times. It's very satisfying. You think that's all I'm going to eat in a day, and you're just like not really hungry. It's very satisfying. But anyway, my kids didn't love it for sandwiches. They liked it cooked, and toasted. That was fine, but they liked the soft, fluffy bread for sandwiches. But I really like the combination of grains and beans there, so I decided, I'll just mix this all up, mix it up in a container, and scoop out what I need and use that to make pancakes. So in my pancake recipe that calls for 3 cups of flour, I used 2 cups of this mixture of grains and beans, and that was the pancakes you had this morning. If I want to make muffins, I use the Ezekiel flour a lot. Today we're going to use a soft red wheat. So the brownies that I'm going to serve you in just a minute, made with Ezekiel flour. So I use Ezekiel flour a lot. And because I started teaching people not to just use it for the bread, we had people start asking us, can you just bucket it in a big 6-gallon bucket? And I'm like, if we did that, the beans would settle to the bottom. You don't have any way of stirring it all up. But we did come up with the idea we could sell it in a 1-gallon pail, because that way you can stir it up. And so we sell it in a 1-gallon pail, the equivalent of 3 of these bags. It'll be loose like this, but this way you can scoop out, if you only need 3 cups, you can scoop out 2 cups of the mixture. Cup of flour for the brownies, scoop out 3/4 of a cup, So you can use what you want. If you're going to make the bread, you might prefer getting it like this if you're going to do the bread recipe. But if you're going to use it for muffins, brownies, cakes, cookies, whatever, you might enjoy having it in the pail like this. Also, you can use this flour in the basic yeast bread dough. And it's a little denser than the hard red and hard white, but it's more like a sandwich bread then. So the sky's the limit with the Ezekiel mix. And the combination of grains and beans there makes a complete protein. Grains are a little deficient in lysine, the amino acid lysine. Beans are high in lysine. Beans are a little deficient in methionine. Grains have methionine. And I wonder if that's why cultures around the world, beans and rice is kind of the mainstay, or cornbread and beans, and we tend peanut butter and grains, because they have the proteins you need. So you're going to get the Ezekiel bread. She's giving that to you now. That's exactly made by the recipe in the book. So that's the heavy, dense, sweet bread. The pancakes you had this morning, I just used this instead of straight wheat flour. So yeah. All right, so that's Ezekiel, and we sell it organic, and we sell a non-organic. It's so funny when people say, can I make sourdough with this? Yes, what do you think they have for, that's where, when sourdough, this was what they were doing, was grinding their own grains. You can convert what you have. Now, I must tell you this. You're going to have to greatly increase your hydration, because the bran and germ, the fiber, sucks up that water. You won't get the big holes that you may be getting with your white flour, but you can make very, very delicious sourdough bread, and your starter will just thrive. You mix some flour and water today, and it'll be bubbly tomorrow. It'll be a toddler, so it won't be ready to make yeast bread. Your bread yet, so feed it over a course of 4 or 5 days, and it'll get stronger and stronger. But absolutely, you can make great sourdough bread with this. It's really, really, really delicious. Yeah. Just takes a little tweaking. A lot of people are like, I have it perfected with my white flour, but not so much with my whole wheat flour. And I'm like, now you know why everyone loved the white flour, because it made fluffier sourdough bread. Yeah, sourdough tends to be a little heavier, but certainly, yes, you can make great, great sourdough with it. All right. So now we want to move from yeast breads to quick breads. So quick breads are just that. Stir up in 5 minutes, muffins bake in 15, coffee cake makes in 30, pancakes, put them on the griddle, and you've got bread. So usually with quick breads, you can use any type of grain. But your soft wheat is going to give you a more moist, fluffier pancake, cake, cookie, whatever. So again, just like with the hard wheat, we had hard red and hard white. With the soft wheat, we have soft red and soft white. Our soft white, we only carry in organic. Our soft red, we only carry in commercial, non-organic. Our soft red wheat is grown in Georgia, so it is a Georgia grown. Our soft white wheat, they grow it in Montana, and we had to ask them. We just visited our grain elevator too when we were out in Montana visiting Olivelli, and we were like, how do you get soft wheat out here? And he goes, they have to irrigate. So, but our soft wheat comes from Montana along with the rest of our wheat. So soft red, soft white, and just like with hard red, hard white, more flavor, milder flavor. So like for cookies, I love a nutty flavor in an oatmeal cookie, so I'm probably going to use soft red. My grandma's sour cream pound cake, although I think it would be delicious with soft red, I'll probably go soft white because that's more traditionally what I'm looking for. The coffee cake you had this morning was soft white. So that's why I thought now for muffins, I'm going to make you some soft red. Okay? So soft white, just chocolate chip cookies. I don't know. Be a toss-up. You try it. See which one you like, the flavor. I love the flavor of red. Not everybody does. Most people do. So I used to make a loaf of bread completely out of hard red, completely out of hard white, and let people taste it. Most people chose the hard red, and even kids, they'll choose the hard red because it's got flavor to it. You're already giving them a different texture, so just don't try to duplicate white flour. Just don't. Just go with it. So anyway, so that's our soft red and soft white. All right, so I want to mill some soft wheat for you. I showed you the hard wheat, and I'm going to mill for my muffins that we're going to make here because I want you to see the difference in the flour. When you talk about converting a white flour recipe, for yeast breads, you pretty much are going to determine how much flour you need anyway. It's not a cut and dry amount. Depends on how much moisture there. If it's a rainy day, it's going to take a little more flour. Did you use the egg? Did you not use the egg? That's when my mother said yeast bread scares me, I was like, you can use an egg or not use an egg. You can cut out half the oil or not, or cut the honey, blah, blah, blah. You wouldn't do that with a cake or, So it's a lot more forgiving. So that's going to determine how much flour you use. But with soft wheat, when you're converting a recipe from white flour to your favorite, and Christmas is coming. I know you all have your favorite Christmas recipes. I'm just going to tell you, every one of them will come out delicious with freshly milled flour. So hard wheat, most of the time, approximately 1-to-1, okay? Soft wheat, on the other hand, I'm about to show you how it mills up. Very fluffy because it's a higher moisture. So let's mill our soft wheat flour, and I'll show you. So I'm going to do about 1 3/4 cups. That'll give me about 2 1/4 cups of flour. And actually, soft wheat mills up a little fluffier than hard wheat. So this is Georgia grown soft red. All right, y'all are fixing to get a dessert overload here. They want to serve you the muffin, which I'm about to make for you, and they're going to go ahead and serve you the brownie, and then the ooey gooey bread, we call it, that I'll show you how we're going to make. That's a yeast bread. The brownie is a quick bread, of course, and then the muffin's a quick bread. We're going to make the muffins now, but here's what I want to show you. I don't know if you can tell, but look at the difference. Can you tell the difference in this flour than the flour I passed around? Do you see how fluffy it is, how light and airy it is? And watch this. That's how high moisture it is. That is going to give you a lot moister cake, cookie, brownie, muffin than hard wheat. But early years, all I knew was hard red wheat. So in my red book, a lot of times I'll say hard red wheat, hard red wheat, hard red wheat. I learned after that you could use other things. So I love the flavor of the soft wheat. But here's what I need to tell you when converting a white flour recipe for cakes, cookies, things like that. Typically, you need to use, for every cup of white flour it calls for, you'll need to use a 1/4 cup more of freshly milled soft wheat. So 1 1/4 cups of freshly milled soft wheat, 2 1/2 cups of freshly milled soft wheat, 3 3/4 of a cup of freshly milled soft wheat. Okay, does that make sense? If it calls for a cup of white flour, 1 1/4 cups. If it calls for 2 cups of white flour, 2 1/2 cups of soft wheat flour. If it calls for 3 cups, 3 1/4. Okay, Grandma's sour cream pound cake, 3 3/4 cups of flour. Does that make sense? So that is going to be your best option there. While we're talking about cookies, before we make muffins, let's go ahead and talk about converting your cookie recipe. I use honey where honey will work because honey is the only truly unprocessed sweetener that God has given us. Maple syrup, fine, but it has to be boiled down into a syrup. Agave nectar, fine, it has to be boiled down into a syrup. So I stick with honey where honey will work. But brownies, cakes, cookies, where you have more flour than sugar, or more equal, like 3 cups of sugar, 3 cups of flour, you start putting that much honey or converting, and typically the rule of thumb with honey is you cut it in half. So if it calls for a cup, you use a cup of sugar, you use a 1/2 cup of honey. Does that make sense? But when you start working with cookies, it messes it all up. And then you add more flour to get the moisture right, and then the cookie's like a cake instead of being that soft, chewy, gooey cookie that you want. So I found 2 sweeteners that I'm comfortable with. Sucanat was the first sweetener I found. It is the juice of the sugar cane extracted, boiled into a syrup, and then only the moisture evaporated off. It is 88% sugar, so it is not a sugar-free sweetener, but it's 12% of other things. The molasses is there, vitamins and minerals are there, but it is still, in my opinion, a simple carbohydrate. Eat it in moderation. And the nice thing about making your treats with freshly milled flour, you're going to eat them in moderation. That was the other thing I noticed when we changed the bread. I didn't crave sweet things. I didn't want dessert. I didn't want chocolate. I didn't want sweet things. And even now, you're just not going to want it. I go eat out, and I'm like, something sweet would be good, but not when I'm eating home and eating my bread. So this is nice, 1-to-1 brown sugar substitute. That's what makes these sweeteners so easy. Christmas is coming. I'm telling you, you can make any of your Christmas desserts. Soft wheat, increased by a 1/4 cup for the white flour. Brown sugar, 1-for-1 Sucanat. It's got all your molasses, all that nice flavor. Don't worry about packing. If it says packed brown sugar, just still use the same amount of the Sucanat. This was the topping on the coffee cake this morning, was Sucanat. Okay? You can tell it's just a nice brown sugar substitute. All right, how about white sugar? Because I made cheesecake one time with Sucanat. Well, it tasted like molasses. It was delicious, but it wasn't my white, creamy cheesecake that I was used to. This is called honey granules. We used to get it from this company as Wholesome Sweeteners. Sucanat is a brand name for Wholesome Sweeteners for this evaporated cane juice product is what it's called. So we used to get this product from Wholesome Sweeteners, and their name for this was Sucanat with honey. Okay? And that's what it is in my red book. It's called Sucanat with honey. And we'd get calls. How much honey do I add to the Sucanat? No. It's a product, okay? So they take the juice of the sugar cane, take the molasses out, add a mild honey to that juice, boil it into a syrup, evaporate the moisture off. So this is a very mild flavored sweetener. We now buy it directly from the manufacturer, and they call it honey granules. So that's what it's called, honey granules. So in the cookbook here, the red book, if you see Sucanat with honey, that is our honey granules product. Does that make sense? Sucanat is still Sucanat. Now, to get it even more complicated, I was hired to write this book by the publishing company. They did not want any brand names. So in my Essential Homeground Flour book, it is called Dark Evaporated Cane Juice, light evaporated cane juice, okay? AKA Sucanat with honey, honey granules, all right? Okay, so 1 to 1 white sugar. I'm not kidding. Grandma's sour cream pound cake, cheesecake, birthday cake, whatever. 1 to 1 white sugar, 1 to 1 brown sugar. And increase that flour in your cookies, and all of your Christmas cookies will be more delicious than they've ever been. Is it better for you than white sugar? Yes, I think so, minimally. You know, if yeah, 12%. Yeah, so this is, like I said, this is 88% sugars, but there's still something there that's not sugars. There's vitamins, minerals. Now, there's iron. I wouldn't eat this to get your iron, no. Again, like I said, moderation on these. I mean, who's not going to make their family's favorite Christmas dessert or cookie? And this just makes that possible. Makes it, well, I think it's a healthier option. I would still do this in moderation, yes. I don't have the specs on the honey granules. I did try to find that after I found the Sucanat. I'm going to keep looking for that to see what else is there. I think it's 97% sugars, but I'm not sure. And I'm not sure what adding the honey does. I mean, other than bringing that flavor profile down, you know, where it's sweeter and milder, I don't know nutritionally what it does. I milled about 1 3/4 cups to make 2 1/4 cups of flour. And we have a chart out there telling you how much to mill to get how much flour. Your soft wheat typically mills up a little fluffier, so I might get a little bit more than 1 1/2 cups. Usually it's somewhere between 1 1/2 cups and 1 3/4 cups, where my hard wheat, I mean, you can almost bet money on it that a cup of grain is going to give you 1 1/2 cups of flour. All right? So let's make our muffins. How about that? You ready? Now, I'm just going to tell you, my muffin recipe was a white flour, you know, muffin recipe, and I just converted it. And I love this recipe. It is so adapting. We just did a kids class in here Thursday, I think it was. And we had one group make banana muffins, one group grated apples, and one group did pumpkin. Same recipe. We just changed it up with different fruit. We even, you know, and some days for me, when the kids were home and you're doing school, and the next thing you know, it's time for dinner, and you're like, I didn't get bread made today. Most days I had a routine. I would get it started very first thing in the morning. We'd eat breakfast, the dough would have risen, then I'd shape the dough, and then it would be ready to bake, you know, before lunch. So that was my basic routine. But some days that didn't happen, and so some days it was like, we're just going to have muffins for lunch. And then some days it was like, we're going to have muffins for dinner. And we're going to have muffins for breakfast tomorrow, you know? And so I just learned to change it up. How can I make lunch muffins not look like breakfast muffins, dinner muffins not look like the other two? And I even, one day, we made chili, and I was going to do cornbread. Cornbread takes 35-40 minutes to bake, and something happened, and I didn't get it done, and I'm like, what if I just do my muffin recipe? So I did the muffin recipe. I don't like sweet cornbread, so I cut the honey in half, and I used corn, and just did the basic muffin recipe. Of course, I got it stirred up, and I'm like, I put frozen blueberries in my blueberry muffins. What if I put frozen whole kernel corn in here? What would that be like? So I dumped that in. And then I'm like, my Mexican cornbread, I put hot pepper jack grated cheese in there. What if, and so I did a block of hot pepper jack grated cheese. That's our favorite muffin. It's a corn muffin, same muffin recipe. All right, watch how easy this recipe is. And the wonderful thing for muffins, you might have all this big fancy equipment. You don't need it. All you need is a bowl. Nope, not that. And a wire whisk. Okay, so let's make our muffins. We do sell Rumford non-aluminum baking powder here. When we first started selling it, it was very hard to find places. I think a lot of places have it now, but we do sell the Rumford non-aluminum. All right, so let's do 2 1/4 cups of flour. And I get a lot of grief by people, baking people, that I don't scoop my flour and rake it off. But honestly, the freshly milled flour is so fluffy, it's kind of the same thing as scooping it in there. But, you know, and I get a lot of grief that I still archaically cook by cups. But you know what? That's how I learned to cook. I'm not opposed to weighing, but it works. So, all right, so there's 2, and then I'm going to do a quarter. This is an 8, so I'll do 2 of these. All right, look how much flour I have left over. Not very much. So I kind of know how much how much grain to mill to get the right amount of flour. And we do have a chart out there that we've kind of calculated. All right, you ready for this muffin recipe? It's so easy. You'll make it twice and you'll remember it. I don't know why they complicate muffin recipes. Don't know why. Why do they say 1 1/4 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, 3/4 teaspoon of salt? So you have to look at the recipe every time. Guess what? This recipe, teaspoon of baking powder, teaspoon of baking soda, a teaspoon of salt. Equal amounts works. Why? Why did somebody do that? Who did that? And so I'm going to change this. That's the basic recipe of the dry ingredients. I'm going to change it up, add a little cinnamon because I'm going to do a banana muffin, and I like cinnamon in my banana muffins. I also love nutmeg, so I'm going to grate some fresh nutmeg. If you don't like nutmeg, don't put this in there. It's your recipe. Recipes are suggestions, okay? And you can change this basic recipe with just the oil you use. Now, I'm using our regular Cretan Mills olive oil, but the kids' class that I did, I was going to let them do grated apples, and I thought, I bet our vanilla maple infused olive oil would be delicious. Oh, my goodness. Thought about doing that today, and I didn't. I just forgot. But and that's what they did, cook your pancakes in the vanilla maple olive oil. And then the other group did pumpkin, and we just changed out the oil. We did orange, the blood orange oil, added a cup of pumpkin, a 1/4 cup of, doesn't need a little more sweetener, so we added a 1/4 cup of sucanat, and then cranberries and pumpkin, and it was delicious. Same basic recipe, pumpkin pie spice instead of cinnamon. So I'm telling you, blueberry, just add them here. I like nutmeg. Did I tell you that? I really like nutmeg. Okay, with quick breads, you want to stir those dry ingredients together, okay? Because you want to make sure you get that baking powder and baking soda fully incorporated before you add liquids, because when you add liquids, it activates it, but also it clumps it up. So if you don't get that fully incorporated into your dry ingredients when you pour in your liquids, it's going to clump up that baking powder or baking soda, and somebody's going to get a big bite of that, and they're going to think those are the worst muffins they've ever tasted. So, and what I usually do once I get it all whisked in is I just kind of sling it to the side and make what I call a well in the center, and then I add my liquids to that. You do not want to stir. Okay, when your honey sits in the measuring cup with the oil, it settles to the bottom so it doesn't come out as nicely. You don't want to stir this until you get all your liquids in. So if you have children helping you, they're going to want to start stirring. Nope, nope, nope. Get all your liquids in. So that was a 1/2 cup of oil, 1/2 cup of honey, a cup of buttermilk, an egg. How easy is this? Teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of baking powder, teaspoon of baking soda, cinnamon, nutmeg, whatever, cardamom, ginger. If you're making pumpkin, that might be nice. 1 egg, and then a cup of buttermilk. If you do not have buttermilk, when your recipe has baking soda, you need an acid, okay? So if you don't have buttermilk, you can, the general rule of thumb ratio is a tablespoon of acid. Can be vinegar, can be one of our nice balsamics, the strawberry, the peach, or whatever. It can be lemon juice, it can be orange juice. A tablespoon, put it in your measuring cup, pour your sweet milk, your regular milk, or your alternative milk. If you need to go dairy-free here, your coconut milk, your almond milk, and bring it up to the cup. But it's a tablespoon of acid per cup of milk to make the right ratio for buttermilk. A little bit of vanilla extract, measured carefully. All right. Now you can stir, but I'm going to make banana, so I'm going to get my bananas ground. And also, I'm going to add some millet. I started learning about all things grain when I started on this venture, and I learned how nutritious millet is. It's a very easy to digest grain. It's wonderful for elderly people, young kids, maybe just babies just starting to eat. It has the broadest spectrum of B vitamins of most of your grains, and like I said, it's very easy to digest. My kids didn't love it like porridge. A lot of countries, India, Asian countries, they eat millet for their, or African countries, they eat millet like we eat oatmeal. This is their morning porridge. I tried it, my kids were like, maybe not. So I just learned that it's crunchy, it's not too hard to just put right in your muffins, your bread dough to make a crunchy bread dough, and without soaking it or anything. So I started adding it. If you don't like it, some people go, I don't like those seeds, they get caught in my teeth. Don't put it in there. It's your muffins, okay? But they're my muffins, so I'm putting it in there. And that's what you had. Did you like the little crunch? Yeah? So let me smash my bananas here. I'm going to use a little tool that we have. It's called a veggie chop that I love. Brad loves it to use it to make salsa, pico. You can determine how fine you want it chopped. Chops nuts, can coarse chop them or go all the way fine. Boiled eggs, put 3 boiled eggs in there, and in seconds you'll have nice and mashed boiled eggs for egg salad, or the yolks for deviled eggs. But I use it for my bananas. You just put the lid on. It's got very, very sharp blades. This is a nice tool for kids to help you in the kitchen. I know it seems funny, but they love it, and you can give them, put an onion in there and let them chop away without giving them a knife. And like I said, egg salad, 3 boiled eggs, boom, boom, 3 pulls, and it's ready. It's called a veggie chop. Lots of different brands make it, but this is our favorite. A little sturdier. And there's your mashed bananas. And it's super easy to clean. The blades are very sharp, so pretty much just rinse it under water, wash this, rinse that, and you're done. You can really use any grain that you want, but absolutely most of the time I make my muffins out of Ezekiel. But I kind of wanted you to taste soft white wheat, soft red wheat. You tasted the Ezekiel in the pancakes and the bread. But no, you would do it just like this. You're just using that flour in here. Yeah. Because some people get confused. You don't make the Ezekiel bread recipe and make it like pancakes or muffins. No, you use this flour in your pancake recipe, in your muffin recipe, and do it exactly the same. If you want to substitute it in your yeast bread, you certainly can, instead of just regular hard red and hard white. Then you would let it rise just like this. Whatever your recipe instructions, that's what you do. You're just substituting the flour. So what I usually do is I kind of stir right there in the middle. Unlike yeast breads, you don't want to overmix quick breads. You don't want to develop gluten. You don't want to be pulling your muffin like that, Not that our bread is that stiff or anything. So I kind of stir right there in the center, get the oil and honey and the egg, and then I start grabbing the rest of my ingredients and flour, and you just mix it until all the flour is mixed up. This is a great whisk in that it can start out as a balloon whisk, and then it can come down to just where you can stir those ingredients without aerating it too much. Pretty ingenious company this company is. Same company that makes the little spatulas, makes the big high heat that I cook with. That's ingenious, so it doesn't touch your counter, or it can lay on the side of your pot and it's high heat. They're pretty unique company. These are our pans that we love here. You saw the Pullman Pans nonstick. This is by USA. Guess where they're made? USA. They're an aluminized steel with a silicone coating. They truly are non-stick. Their new line that they have just come out with is a ceramic coating. Little thinner. This is supposed to be more commercial grade, and this is more home use. And they're getting away from the silicone and everybody's going ceramic for non-stick coating now, just to get away from some of the chemicals. This one, I think you need to lower the oven temperature, kind of almost like glass. If you cook in glass pans, perfectly fine. Lower that temperature 25 degrees, or you're going to get too brown of a crust. And I'm finding this is cooking kind of that same way, and then maybe not as long. And then again, scoop. Scoop is your best friend. And because we added banana here, it's probably going to give us a little bit more batter than will fill a 12-cup muffin. You can always, make more muffins, or I use a little mini loaf pan and put the rest of the batter in that. So we'll just get these scooped. The nice thing about the muffins, they're going to bake in about 15 minutes. With the fruit in there, sometimes the added moisture may add 5 minutes, but I usually check them at 15 just to make sure. The coffee cake is 350, just depends on your recipe. Most of the time, muffins and biscuits cook a little hotter temperature. You want to get them done, but still keep that inside moist, so that's why you kind of do that. So most of the time, I bake muffins at 400 for 15 minutes, check them. Fruited ones typically, because the added moisture, a little bit more time. But since I'm going to use the ceramic pan, I'm going to go ahead and put it in my 375 oven. On these, you don't check by temperature, you check with the toothpick test. Or we kind of touch the top. If it sinks in when you press it, then they're not done, they're still wet. But most of the time, just a toothpick test. And honestly, I use my thermometer as a toothpick, so yeah. I did about a cup. For most of them, like I do a cup of blueberries, cup of whole kernel corn, a cup of grated apple. Honestly, we had some small apples, we did 2. I had a large apple, and we just did 1. I mean, it's really how apple-y do you want it? Within reason, I wouldn't put 3 cups in that recipe, but it's about a cup, somewhere there. I didn't measure it, I just grated a whole apple. Spelt is an older grain, and it's kind of the best of both worlds. It has enough protein to make yeast bread, but it mills up very fluffy like soft wheat. So it makes great cakes and cookies if you want that nice red, nutty flavor. It has more of a red wheat flavor. If you're going to use it in cakes and cookies, you're going to have to treat it like soft wheat. You're going to have to increase the flour. In yeast bread, I find that it needs more flour. My basic bread recipe that calls for 4.5 cups of flour, and I pretty much use that, 5.5 cups of spelt. You just have to play with it, especially if you're using a bread machine. First time or two, you're just going to make the recipe, check the dough, after it's kneaded a little bit and go, that looks like soup. I need a little more flour. But spelt, I find, takes 5.5 cups. Ezekiel mix takes about 5 cups if you do it just, in the bread machine with that basic recipe. I use a Kamut red blend now. That's my favorite. And Kamut's another ancient grain. It's a great pasta making grain. If you're going to make pasta, get some Kamut. It's the grandfather of durum wheat, which is pasta making wheat. And we've been told that about 80% of the Kamut grown in this country goes to Italy to make pasta. And we now have a Kamut pasta already made, dry pasta, shells and little spirals. So, and it's delicious. I just made a pasta salad yesterday, recipe trialing for the Christmas class. So her question is, if you're going to make the Ezekiel bread that's in the recipe and you want to cut back on the honey, will that change the consistency of the bread? Yes, it will. It's going to make it more dense, and you might even, if you cut the honey out altogether, you're probably going to get more like a bread dough. If you were going to do that and wanted to cut it back, I would probably just use the basic bread dough and just use the Ezekiel flour in here. If you want it to be not so sweet and dense, and I would probably just use the basic bread dough recipe, just use the Ezekiel flour. Does that make sense? Instead of tweaking that recipe and changing it up so much, yeah. Because it won't use as much flour if you cut some of the liquid out. So if you want Ezekiel bread for sandwiches, use the same basic bread dough that we just did, 1.5 cups of water, 1/3 cup of water, blah, blah, blah. And just use the Ezekiel flour in that. And the Ezekiel bread, I do need, even though it's a battery bread, I do need it in the Ankarsrum, yes. Doesn't do well in the bread machine because it's too much dough. And then it's too complicated to try to cut it in half. And with the Ezekiel bread, if you have KitchenAids, I would use the paddle attachment, not the dough hook, because it is a battery bread. And someone asked me at the break, if you have a KitchenAid, you don't need, if you're making a basic bread dough, you don't need to start with the paddle first. Go ahead and start with that dough hook. Let your dough be a little loose. It just may take longer to knead. The best bread I ever made in the KitchenAid, because it doesn't have a timer, I put it on, let it be loose. I didn't let it clear the side of the bowl and everything, and went down and started a load of laundry. The next thing I know, cleaned off my laundry table, did something else, folded a load of laundry. You know how you do. And then you clean out a cabinet, and then you sweep. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I have bread dough kneading. And it needed probably 30 to 40 minutes. It was the best, lightest, fluffiest bread I'd ever made. It's really difficult to over-knead your whole grains, with the exception of spelt and rye. Those will, with spelt or rye, particularly rye, if you're kneading rye, as soon as it comes in a ball, and looks shiny, stop kneading. Turn the mixer off. Or it will turn to something that looks like soup. It'll just turn to goo, and there's no recovering it. You can't add more flour and recover it. It's done. Just make tortillas or something. It's not going to rise. It breaks down very easily. Spelt, not as bad as rye, but you can overknead those because they're just a little lower protein structure. Yeah. Everybody thinks rye has this real strong flavor. It doesn't. It makes great cakes. It makes great brownies because it's almost like a soft wheat. The distinctive flavor that you associate with rye is caraway seeds. If you don't like rye, you don't like caraway seeds, most probably. So, so you can use rye in your muffins or whatever, and it makes really good sourdough starter. It's very volatile. I don't typically, her question is, do I ever whisk the eggs? Unless it says specifically to do that, but most of the time I don't. I'm like, and that's why I'll kind of make a little well, and I'll kind of stir it up there in the center, because I'm using honey, and that's thick. If I try to pour that in, I'm going to have to mix harder to get that all stirred in. And if I'm doubling my muffin recipe, I do it just the way I showed you. If I'm tripling and quadrupling, I usually put my liquids in one bowl and my dry in the other, and I go ahead and stir those up to get all that honey. I mean, that's a lot of honey and eggs to get mixed in, because you don't want to overmix pancakes, muffins, things like that. Okay? All right. It has risen. Nice and nice. I'm going to use a little oil on my rolling mat. And I love a rolling mat because it doesn't slip around, and it's silicone, so the dough doesn't tend to stick as much as it would to the counter. And then you just pick it up and go wash it. It's a little cleaner on your counter. I feel like I've forgotten something. Have I done everything? Okay, all right. This is my dream team of helpers over here. Julie, wave. Hope, and Sarah. Imelda, wave. Imelda is, she helps me prep a lot and does all my dirty dishes. Yes, we really appreciate Imelda. And Imelda and Mia, I haven't seen Mia lately. Mia that was serving this morning, Imelda and Mia, they're our warehouse crew. We have another warehouse down where we package all the grain. Imelda packages every 2-pound bag, every pail that you get. Imelda packages it. She has this little corner, and she's over there. You can't see her some days. She's behind all the pails and the bags and the buckets, all the lecithin. If it's in a bag, Imelda has packaged it, or if it's in a 1-gallon pail. So Lloyd is our warehouse manager, and Mia, they usually do all the big buckets and all the Ezekiel mix. All right, this is a mound of dough. What do y'all think? Do I look like Lucy? We'll put all this in the oven, and the bread's going to just keep coming out. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. Now, what I usually do at home is I stick this in the sink, throw the roller and scraper in, just start filling it with water, let it fill. But I don't do that to them because they're going to come get this, and I won't fill it with water. It'd be too hard to take to the kitchen. But that's what I do, and then it just cleans right up. You can put it in the dishwasher, the metal bowl, but usually my dishwasher is full. But even though your owner's manual might tell you that the parts can go in the dishwasher, do not put the parts in the dishwasher. European dishwashers do not have the heating elements like American dishwashers. So I put my slicer shredder, the attachment that I showed you, and it warped it because the dishwashers get so hot here. So yeah. Notice when I dump the dough out, I just kind of bring it together. You don't want to dig into it. The inside's sticky. So you don't want to dig into it. You don't need to knead it. It's already kneaded. And notice I just kind of let it get coated with oil and then just work on the outside, okay? If you use flour, you can dust it with some flour. If the dough were a lot looser than this, I would probably use some flour on my board, but I think this dough feels really, really nice. So now I'm just going to divide it. So now we're going to take this dough and I'm going to make a plain loaf of bread. And here's where you have to start getting a little more technical. You need to put the right amount of dough in the right size pan. If you put too little, you're going to get a squatty loaf. If you put too much, you'll get a dense kind of layer on the bottom. So this is I think this is a 1.5 pound pan. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm going to say it is because I know the size. So a 1.5 pound pan. So when a loaf pan says that it's a 1.5 pound pan or a 2 pound pan, that is the finished loaf of bread. You always lose about 1/4 pound, maybe not quite that much, of moisture and so weight when you bake it. So if that pan says it's a 2 pound loaf pan, you probably want to put about 2¼ pounds of dough in there, okay? It's like the Zojirushi. It says it's a 2 pound bread machine. If you do that basic recipe and that I developed for the Zojirushi, that's about 2¼ or 2½ pounds of dough, okay? So I just weigh my dough so I make sure I have the right amount. So I'm going to do 1.5 pounds of dough in here. Actually, a little bit more. About 1 3/4 pounds because this is a 1.5 pound pan. So now you want to take the dough and we're going to shape it just like we did our little round balls. Just going to kind of wiggle and jiggle. If you need to put a little oil on your hands or a little water, you can even use water here. So I just kind of flop it around a little bit, and then I just pull and stretch, pull and stretch, pull it. Kind of like you're putting a diaper on a baby, I guess. And then fold it over towards you. And then this is where I use the heel of my hands to squish and elongate, and then wrap it up over itself. And then I just made my loaf. Just tuck those ends under, make it conform. And then just put it down in the loaf pan. Okay? Now, how long does bread rise? Depends on, till it's double. There you go. Depends on how warm or cold your house is. Okay? So now you want to look at where that pan is in your, where that dough is in your pan. How much is it filling up? Don't worry about the end so much. Kind of look right here at the middle. That is more than half filling that up, right? So it's kind of like right there. That means to double, this can round up over this pan. If you don't put that much dough in, a lot of people, they'll put too little dough, doesn't even half fill the pan, but they want a nice tall round loaf of bread. Well, to get that, you've got to put enough dough in there. And so that means double is when it gets to right here. So just think about that now. I don't want to stuff 2 pounds of dough in here because then it'll be dense and heavy on the bottom. So that's what we're looking for. We're not cooking this in a cloche. This is conventional cooking. This has to rise, okay? And this is the critical rise time. That dough in that bowl could have risen another hour or so. The garlic rolls you had, I made, they were kneading right when the class began, and he made them, at noon or 11, I guess. So they rose about an hour. So it just depends. This is not as critical within reason. The yeast does start eating all the food and will begin dying, making alcohol. So within reason, you need to be using the dough. But that's not, I could have punched that dough down, let it rise again, punched it down, let it rise again. Not so here, okay? Once you've got your loaf shaped, then now's when you set a timer, okay? You can let it rise on the counter. I don't worry about covering it unless my house is particularly cold, and it's going to take a long, long time. But you can put it in a proofing oven if you have. We have a proofing oven here that we use sometimes. Also, I have proofer settings on my oven. Again, if you use that, set a timer, because I'm telling you, out of sight, out of mind. That loaf of bread I told you I just had that I made last week, I put in the oven to rise, just on a little bit of warm. I totally forgot about it. An hour later, I come back, I'm like, it was late at night. I'm like, nope, I'm just baking it. I don't care. Well, it kind of fell apart inside because it had risen too much. So anyway, so out of sight, out of mind. These have proofing oven settings. My oven at home does not. I'll tell you how old my oven is in 2 words. Harvest Gold. Harvest Gold. And not the new look of Harvest Gold. So that's how old my oven is. So the lowest temperature it'll go is 225. That's too hot to rise your bread. 110, you can't go over 110 or your yeast will actually start dying. So what I do, if my house is particularly cold and I want to speed up the rising process, I'll turn it on. Sometimes I'll even put my pans in there and turn it on just a few minutes while I dump the dough out or something. Turn the oven off, and then by the time I've shaped my loaf, put them in the warm pan. They'll rise pretty quickly. And then take it out to preheat your oven. And you want, once it's risen to double, they need to be going in the oven to bake, not go, oh, I think I'll turn my oven on now to preheat, especially if it's these ovens that take 2 days to preheat. So, yeah, don't love my ovens, but it is what it is. So my oven at home preheats very, very quickly. All right, so now I'll show you how you can make a braided loaf of bread. That is the ugliest loaf I have ever shaped. I think I'm going to shape it again. Let's try again. Let's try again. I don't like the way that looks. I think my hands are too sticky. What you laughing at over there, Dr. Myers? It does. So pull and stretch, pull and stretch, pull and stretch, pull and stretch, and now squish. There we go. Sometimes if you don't get enough oil on your counter or even flour, it'll make that surface look kind of crinkly. Like cellulite. Who likes that? Did I just say that? No. Golly. All right. I think that's better. We don't know. I'm going to dump this one out. All right. So now I'll show you how to do a braided loaf. I'm so glad Tiffany can edit me. I'm actually going to use a little flour. This is a little sticky. The bowl, yeah. I think that's the problem I'm having. It's just a little sticky. Don't want to work it in. Just keep it on the surface. It's going to be so much better. And then now, what I'm going to show you is how to do a braided loaf of bread. So I take the dough for 1 loaf. I divided it into thirds. And I like to just roll it on the mat. It's being difficult to work with today because Brad's not here. He always does this for me. Think of him going to the Bulldog game and leaving me helpless. Helpless. Who said that? Did you say that? You think I'm helpless? No. That's why you said that. I know. You're like, yeah. So this is just a fun way to shape the bread. In the early days when I first started, like I said, my original recipe was a white flour recipe. How I made bread was a Jewish challah bread recipe. And so that used a lot of eggs, and then they braided the loaves traditionally. So I got used to braiding my loaves. And in the early days when I started really making all of our bread, I had a terrible time of getting the air bubbles out. And if you don't, that's why I started shaping it more like that, of really getting it squished and getting those air bubbles out. So I would just braid the loaves because then you totally work it enough to get the air bubbles out. So now I just work just like you're braiding anything else, left over right, right over left. You don't tug too tight. You don't want it to be real tight or it'll kind of split when it starts rising. You get to the end and just kind of wrap that end around. Notice I left my top end open. Some people pinch it together, but I think it's prettier if you'll do it like this. We're going to braid backwards. It's not that hard. Just watch. It's not hard at all. You'll do it from now on. Okay. Whatever is on top, whatever rope is on top goes under. So this one's on top, it goes under. This is now on top, it goes under. On top, you see? Super easy. And now I have a braided loaf of bread. We could squish it down in here, but I think I'm going to use a loaf pan. Oh, you got the muffins? You want to bring them up here and show them? So here's the muffins. Now, with muffins and quick breads, cakes, you do let them sweat in the pan. Have you ever thought about why a cake says let it cool in the pan 10 minutes, but no more than 20? Do you know why it says that? You want it to sweat, but if it gets too cool, it's going to harden to the pan. So that's why you don't go beyond 20 minutes. So these are going to come right up. Look, this is the nonstick pan. Isn't that amazing? And guess where it's made? USA. So usually about 5 minutes on the muffins. Let them just cool a little bit to sweat just a little bit. Then take them out so they don't get soggy. Okay? There you go, madam. I'm actually going to spritz with a little water. This will make a nice dinner bread. Well, we'll just use sesame seeds. It's your bread. It's my bread. Why did I say it's your bread? It's my bread. I can do what I want. I think poppy seeds are pretty, but I didn't see them right away. In the water, you spritz with the water that acts like glue that'll hold your seeds or whatever on. So you can do an egg wash if you want. Some people do that. There we go. And again, that needs to rise. I'm going to cut off the dough for one more loaf of bread. I'm going to make what's called an ooey gooey bread. But before I do that, I'll show you how I make rolls and hamburger buns. And then I'll pass that off to my helpers to make, unless anybody wants to come up and make hamburger buns. So I'm using about a little more, about 1 3/4 pounds of dough. Again, notice I'm just sprinkling the flour on the surface. I'm not working it in. That's a key. A lot of times people like to help us make rolls when we're catering for 500 people for an event. And you should see their hands are covered with dough because they dig into that dough. It's sticky inside there. So you just want to cut it away. So for hamburger buns, I have discovered about 3 ounces for a nice hamburger bun. My son likes 4 because he likes a big burger. But one basic recipe will make about 13 nice size 3-ounce hamburger buns. So dozen burgers and then one for the cook. So there's several ways you can make hamburger buns. And then dinner rolls, I think 1.5 ounces is a nice size little dinner roll. They're going to look really small, but once you got to remember, once they rise, so like that's 1.5 ounces. And so I'm going to round it for a little dinner roll. And the secret there is use your pinky and your thumb and just kind of, a lot of people think I'm cupping like that, but I'm using my pinky and my thumb to round it. You really don't even need to cup over it. So that's a nice size little dinner roll. Remember, it's going to rise till double. So that's 1.5 ounces. So that's a great dinner roll. This is a hamburger bun, which you can round them if you want. So that's your nice hamburger bun. If you want to flatten it a little bit, you can. Just depends on what you want. Or our signature rolls, when I first started and we'd take rolls everywhere, was this little knotted roll. And I still make my hamburger buns that way. My little grandsons love my bread. So have a rope here. Cross it over like you're going to tie a knot, and then tie a knot. Tuck it under, and there's a little knotted roll. You can take the dough for, I'd probably do maybe 2 ounces, divide it into 3, roll those in a little ball, drop them in a muffin cup, and then you've got your little clover leaf. There's so many things you can do. Or you can take your dinner roll, and I like to, like at Thanksgiving and things like that, I like to melt butter in a casserole dish, and then put these in, and you can kind of dip them in the warm butter, go down and then turn it over, dip it in the warm butter, and put them kind of sides touching. So I put them kind of close together, and then they'll rise straight up, almost like a Hawaiian roll or little, the little rolls, the break-apart rolls. Yeah, so you can do that. So that's how you make dinner rolls and all of that. So can I pass this off to y'all? All right. So now I'm going to show you how to make a filled bread, the ooey gooey bread. So, and you can do this. We make pizza bread, garlic bread, sausage bread, all kinds of things. Just roll it out into a rectangle. You can put cheese and sauce and sausage and onions and peppers, whatever, butter, cinnamon, sugar, or cinnamon sucanat, and apples, whatever, coconut flakes if you want. But I'm just going to show you how to make a basic, we call it ooey gooey bread. So for so long I would roll the dough out, spread it with butter, sprinkle it with cinnamon and sucanat for the bread. Well, one morning I was going to make coffee cake. So I had already made the topping, and it's just sucanat, cinnamon, nutmeg with the butter already added. And I didn't get coffee cake made, so I had bread dough rising. So I was like, I'm just going to put that topping inside the bread dough, or, like I would do cinnamon rolls. It's the same thing. Well, it bakes up very ooey gooey. It kind of goos out, and yeah. And so that's why my children went, wow, Mom, this is ooey gooey bread, and they really loved it. So now I kind of do that. But this is how you'd make cinnamon rolls. Just roll it out. Oops. And with cinnamon rolls, just think about this. How much should you roll it out? How many cinnamon rolls do you want, and how big do you want them? This way is going to determine how big they are. If you want a big fat cinnamon roll, then roll it deep or wide. If you want it, now my son calls that the opposite. I call this wide and this long. If you want more cinnamon rolls that are smaller, roll it long and less wide. Does that make sense? Okay, but we're just going to make a bread today. This is the same topping for the coffee cake. I'm just going to spread it in here. Now, I didn't have coffee cake topping made the other day, and I wanted to make cinnamon bread. We just hosted the pastor from Tanzania, was staying with us, and he really liked this bread. So I decided I'd make more. Well, I didn't have the coffee cake topping, so I just spread it with butter. Well, then got to thinking, I love orange, like orange cinnamon rolls. And so I just drizzled it with some of our blood orange oil and then sprinkled it with the cinnamon, and it was really delicious. I'll have to say, those nasty orange Danish nasty things, my mother used to make those. You know what I'm talking, the wampum biscuits, you wamp the can and it pops open, and is that not, y'all didn't call them that? That's what I thought they were called, wampum biscuits. I mean, you wamp the can, it pops open, and yeah. So in a pinch she would do those, but I'm telling you, I really love the orange Danish things that came out of that. Not anymore, of course, because they taste like chemicals now. So that bread was pretty delicious with that little bit of orange oil on there. So, okay. All right. So now we're just going to fold the ends over, kind of close that end up. And now we're just going to lift and roll. And this is how you would make cinnamon rolls, except you don't need to fold the ends under or over. I call it under, Brad calls it over, and it really is over, isn't it? And so then you just roll it up. This is one time you really want to make sure you have enough flour or oil on your surface so that it doesn't stick, especially if it's cinnamon rolls here. One recipe makes, like I said, about 12, 13 nice-sized hamburger buns, about a dozen nice-sized cinnamon rolls. If you want to make them big, smaller cinnamon rolls, it'll make more, about 20, I think, of maybe that big, about that tall. 2 dozen donuts. Just fry them up. Just cut it. I let it rest just a little bit. So I cut my donuts, put them in a warm place to rise, just get a little airy while my oil heats, and then just drop them in. It doesn't have to rise very long. And then just make I use the honey granules for the icing. I powder it in a blender. Just add your milk, butter, vanilla, or water, whatever You do. So what I'm doing here is I'm stretching this out, making it a little longer rope. We learned this at a bakery convention. I always did this, and I wanted the filling to kind of be all throughout instead of just in a circle, which I think the circle is cool, you know, the swirl. But so I would always stretch it out into a rope, cut the rope in 3 and braid it. Well, we were at a bakery convention, and one of the bakers showed us this. He called it a J braid. So you just you just squish it out, then you bring it up and you make a J. Okay? I can only do this once, so watch. I know y'all are getting sleepy. So make a J, then take the tail and make a 6. You with me? Now grab the loop and turn it away from you. If you turn it towards you, you're going to undo the whole mess, okay? Or the whole thing. So grab the loop, turn it away from you so you're twisting it. Take the tail, scoop it under and in. And now you have this cute little braid, and you have this filling that's all throughout. And I did that because when we started serving samples, if you just had the swirl, somebody might not get very much cinnamon. And anyway, I wanted the swirl all throughout. So that's the way you make that J braid. It's just a fun thing to do. And then just put that dough down in there. And these are all rising. That's already risen. Her question is, if I want to freeze it to bake it later, do not let it rise. Soon as you shape it, get this tightly covered, goes in the freezer. Now a loaf like this or a pan of cinnamon rolls is going to take 10, 12 hours to thaw and rise, okay? But yeah, so as soon as you cut the cinnamon rolls, put them in the pan, boom, goes in the freezer. As soon as you shape and I've done dinner rolls like for Christmas, I've done that as well. Let them freeze, but I need my cookie sheets. As soon as they're little hard rocks, I throw them in a Ziploc bag, make my cookies and things for Christmas. Then sometime, like a Christmas Eve dinner, I want dinner rolls. I take them out. They'll take about 4 to 6 hours to thaw and rise, you know, because they're smaller, depending on how warm your house is. But yeah, that's what I do. But yeah, you want to do it before it rises at all here. So notice my little bottles. This is made by a company. They spent years developing a nozzle that would spray oil without clogging up. And do you remember the pumps that we were going to all use and get away from Pam and the sprays? And they clogged up within a week, maybe 2 if you were fortunate. And oh yeah, so they developed this nozzle. I don't know how old this little bottle is for me. It's several years and it's never clogged up. And they sell it as a 2-pack, which I think is supposed to be oil and vinegar, but I love it. I use it as oil and water because I use my oil on my board, spritz this for my cloche baking, and then also when I go to clean up, you'll see I'll spritz with water and scoop it up with this, and then wipe it with a cloth, and it's easy. All right, y'all's favorite bread was the garlic rolls, right? So we're going to make that, and that will be the last thing we do before I serve y'all some kefir, and then you can have some delicious cloche bread that we made in class with some olive oil dipping herbs. I used to say you can get it as you pass out, but hopefully you're not passing out. But so as you leave, you can go over there and get a wonderful sample of the cloche bread. And do we have the bowl with the flour? I'm going to put just a little bit of flour on this. Normally I don't need flour at all, but it's a little stickier today. So again, just on the surface, you don't need a lot. This is one full recipe, okay? So I'll show you. It makes a lot of garlic rolls. And because it's one full recipe, I'm going to cut it down the center so the rolls aren't so big. But this is the basic bread dough. Hard white wheat, all hard white wheat, okay? Because I want to taste the flavor of the garlic, not the flavor of the bread. Now you don't want to cut with a knife on this rolling mat. So for cinnamon rolls, I just use my chopper scraper here, and that's not enough to cut in here. And then we do have nylon pizza rollers for cutting the strips like I'm going to show you. Olive oil dipping herbs, ladies. Y'all read my mind. I see y'all whispering over there. Got them ready. It's wonderful when you have helpers that know what you need before you need it, isn't it? We have great employees here. Everyone here mills their flour and makes their bread, so you do not have to just talk to me to troubleshoot your bread making endeavors. I hope today you're encouraged. I hope you leave here going, I can do this. If she can do this, I can do this. Like Brad said, 33 years of doing this, we've learned some tricks, found some tools that have made life easy for us, and I'm still learning. I don't claim to have mastered it all. Pizza dough, if I wanted pizza dough, I'd use the hard white wheat for pizza dough. All right. I've always made our own pizza, even when I used white flour years before bread. All righty. Now, the way I made garlic rolls when I first developed this recipe was I just cut it in strips, rolled them up, and then after they were risen and baked, I basted them with garlic butter. But Brad likes this. He puts it on tortillas, he puts it on eggs, he puts it on everything. So he discovered basting the dough with this delicious garlic and olive oil. It's the olive oil dipping sauce that's in your handout. And he puts a lot more garlic than is there. Maybe not 10 times, but he puts a lot. And it's delicious. I'm not going to complain. Okay, I didn't roll a very pretty rectangle, but you know what? We're going with it. Where's Brad when you need him? Oh, that's right. He's at a Bulldog game. Or headed there. And then he sprinkles with a little more Italian seasoning. Okay, so now I'm just going to cut down the center. If you only do the dough, say, for one loaf of bread, I would just roll it in a longer rectangle. But this is, like I said, with the cinnamon rolls, I don't want the roll to be this big. I want it kind of the way you had it. So now we just cut it in strips. And you don't have to be real exact. I can tell that I already got that half bigger than this half. Doesn't matter. If I have a really tiny piece, I'll just do the whole thing. Now, if Brad were here, he would tell you have to do it this way. Here, let me do these. All right, so roll it like a sleeping bag. Some people roll it like a snail, okay, and like a little cinnamon roll, and that's fine if that's what you want. But Brad will tell you you can't, and he may even call and make sure you're not doing it this way. I will not. No, just kidding. So he says tuck and roll like you're rolling up a sleeping bag. You know how to squish a sleeping bag so you can get it back in that bag that it came in? So tuck and roll, and it just kind of squishes the ends out, and it just makes a kind of a cute presentation, if there's such a thing as cute bread. I don't know. Just tuck and roll, tuck and roll. And now these will have to rise before they bake. Then they're going to bake. Usually I bake these at 400. I check them in about 15 minutes. Most of, like the dinner rolls and hamburger buns, I do 400 for 10 minutes depending, and check them. And those I do use a thermometer to make sure they're 190 to 200. So yeah, so these need to rise before you bake them. After they're baked, he bastes them with garlic butter, real garlic, not that nasty mint stuff, okay? Real garlic, real butter. My fats that I use, olive oil is my main one. I use it where it works. In recipes where I'm going to use butter, I use unsalted butter. And I'm pretty particular about my butter. I use organic because toxins are stored in the fats of an animal, so I think I'm going organic with your high fat, especially dairy and things like that. So I use unsalted butter, and I never thought about that for years until I met Charmaine Skillen that makes the Salt Sisters line of seasoning, the bread dipping herbs, and Redmond salt of unrefined salt. I want to make sure that I'm using unrefined salt in my baking, and so I use unsalted butter so that two things. I can determine how much salt is in the recipe because different brands have different saltiness, and then also that I'm using unrefined. When I switched, Brad was like, the garlic rolls aren't as good, and I'm like, it's because it's unsalted butter, so he does dust them with a little bit of salt to finish them off. Yeah, of the Redmond salt. So these are going to rise. Bake at 400. After they're baked, baste them with garlic, butter, and you've got it. All right. I'm going to pass them to you guys, my wonderful helpers over there. Any questions? Everybody good? Y'all ready to go? Ready to fall asleep? Yes. The second rise is always rise till double of whatever, however you shaped them. It's a little hard to tell with like rolls, dinner rolls, or even this loaf that's kind of free form. In your loaf pan, you can kind of tell easier. So when you come in and you kind of jiggle and it's light and airy feeling, then that's great. Like you won't go, wow, that roll is double. But then just know there is something called oven spring that they will rise even more in the oven. Sometimes my roll will be a little bigger than this, and it'll be that big after I bake it. It really is nice. Your loaves, inch or two sometimes, oven spring, from just the heat of the oven. And that's why double, they need to be going in the oven, because if you let them over rise, then when they try to do the oven spring, they collapse on you. Set a timer on rising. Only if I'm putting in a proofer oven or if I'm not going to be around. And it's just to remind you to go check and see if it's double. A gauge, if like this temperature here, those are going to take about 30 minutes from the time I shaped them. So we'll get to baking. If it's real warm, like in the winter, we have a wood burning stove, so it gets really warm in that part of our house, and so it'll rise really quickly. Just depends. The biggest thing is if you put it in a proofer oven or in the, warm the oven and let them set a timer so you don't forget. As I'm walking through my kitchen, I can see my bread, but if it's in there, whoop, out of sight, out of mind. So that's the main thing I was saying, set a timer. And if you do put it in a proofer oven, I would look at it in about 20 minutes. And then if you need more time, but yeah. Now, if I overrise this, I can punch it down and shape it again. If I overrise this, what am I going to do with that mess? So I just bake it. And this one's going to rise a little more slowly and takes a little longer to bake. Generally, loaves of bread, you bake at 350 for roughly 30 minutes, depending on the size of your loaf. The cloche, I do 375. The rolls, I do 400. Okay? Yep. I'll take those rolls off and put them on their pan with rolls. Pasta. We have a pasta recipe in my book. I would use Kamut. Kamut. It's going to make a smoother, less grainy pasta than if you use hard red or hard white wheat. We used to carry durum wheat, which is what most pasta is made of, but we like the Kamut so much better, we just kind of quit carrying the durum. But just so you know, most pasta you'll see on the label that says semolina flour, that is not a grain. That is enriched white durum wheat, okay, where they've sifted the bran and germ out. That's what semolina is. We do have a whole grain brown rice pasta that we sell, and then we just started carrying a delicious Kamut pasta, which I'm very, very excited about. Yeah. So, all right, I got one last thing I'm going to give you as you pass out. I'm going to let you come up and taste the bread, but I also want to serve you some of our delicious juice kefir. So in the front refrigerator in our store, we sell a starter. Most of you are probably, that's fine. Yeah, not that one, not that one. Most of you are probably familiar with milk kefir, right? You've seen the bottles of Lifeway kefir or whatever. For years, I always called it pourable yogurt. I thought it's the same. It's different organisms, actually. Some set the same as make yogurt, but most of the time, yogurt, they only have maybe two they have to have. Maybe some good brands have 5. Kefir usually uses about 7, sometimes 8 or even 10. Little bit different organisms. It's those same organisms that make your sourdough starter. Kefir uses symbiotic relationship of bacteria and yeast. The bacteria produces acid because it's lactic acid organisms. It's those same organisms that live in your gut. They ferment the milk. They eat the sugars, ferment the milk. But what you don't realize in milk kefir, there is yeast in there, and it's a bit effervescent, but because of the thickness of the milk, you don't feel the carbonation. The yeast, just like it does in your bread dough, produces carbon dioxide when it eats sugars. So when you put those organisms in juice, guess what it does? It eats the sugars, makes a tart juice, but it also naturally carbonates it. Okay? See? You don't want to shake it. Do you hear that? So it's naturally carbonated. It is this delicious, bubbly, probiotic drink that your children will love, you will love, and it helps restore that good gut organisms, and it helps improve digestion. Every person that we have told about kefir juice, drinking this with your meal and drinking it maybe a few times a day, that had acid reflux, it stopped it. It improved it. It healed it. And they no longer have to take medication. Now, we are not suggesting that you stop your medication cold turkey, because that can create a whole nother issue, because you've shut down the acid pump and now you've taken that away and you can get really serious. Just start drinking this and you might notice that you can kind of cut back and not need it. So anyway, but it's a good probiotic drink. How do you make it? You ready for this? Super easy. In the front refrigerator in the store, we sell this starter. This is a half a cup of this, all right? So what you do, buy your bottle of juice, 100% fruit juice. It can be apple juice, it can be grape juice. One of my favorites, white grape peach. What I'm going to do is I need to take a half a cup off to make room for my starter. So then I take my starter, pour it in here. Once I get most of it in there, I swirl it up so I get all that good sediment on the bottom. Any of y'all make kombucha? That's the same as that mother, all that sediment in the bottom. That is the very potent organisms. It's all throughout the juice, but it's very potent there. All right, so I just put it in there. I'm going to swirl up a little bit more. Got a little bit more there. Come on. All right, so we just inoculated this whole bottle. Now we're going to shake it up. Unlike yogurt organisms that they like 110 degrees to incubate. That's why you have to have a yogurt maker to keep 110. This is just fine at room temperature. So it's inoculated, it's ready to just sit there. Tomorrow morning, about 24 hours, it'll be ready. It'll look like this, have sediment on the bottom, it'll be nice and fat. This one's so full, I can see it bubbling. Whoever made this for me yesterday got it so full it didn't have an opportunity to expand. So that's it. This will be ready tomorrow. Once it's ready, burp it, because it'll be fat like this one. Burp it, start drinking it, but keep it in your refrigerator from now on. What you have in this bottle is a whole bottle of starter. You never have to buy this again. Before you drink all this, use a half a cup to start your next bottle. Before you drink all that, use a half a cup to start your next bottle, okay? If you have teenagers that drink it all and put the bottle in the refrigerator thinking that you won't notice, like, really? Really? And you go and you take it out, as long as you have that sediment on the bottom, you can start a new bottle, okay? So if you have no juice, and that's kind of what Brad and I do now because we don't drink it as fast as our kids when they were home drink it. So what we'll do is we'll maybe drink it all. Then when we take the half a cup off of our bottle, we pour it in there, swirl up all that sediment, and then pour it back in. And now we don't have a half a cup floating around because we don't drink fruit juice like this. Yeah, are you following me? So as long as you have the sediment, you can just use the sediment to pour your half a cup that you took off of your bottle, pour it in the empty bottle that your teenager left in the fridge for you, swirl up that sediment, then pour it right back in the bottle you took that out of. Does that make sense? Are y'all with me, or are you like brain dead because you're fried? All right. And then you got your starter. So this is the bottle I just started. It'll be ready tomorrow. Burp it, put it in the refrigerator, start drinking it. You have a whole bottle of starter. If you're drinking out of it every day, you're going to be fine. You want to start it tight, or it won't carbonate as well. The gases will just come off. So you do want to start it tight, but you want to burp it, put it in your refrigerator. It is volatile. As much as I hate plastic, I do my kefir in plastic. I have exploded glass bottles because of the carbonation, especially if the cap is on tight. If you go away on vacation for a weekend or a week, just loosen the cap in your refrigerator. It's not like kombucha that you have to make it, a lot, just when you drink it, when you finish drinking it. It will continue to ferment and eat the sugars the longer it's in the refrigerator, and it'll get an end product of yeast is alcohol, okay? So it will get very beerish tasting if it's in there 3 weeks or so without finishing it. So if it's just you and you're not going to drink that much, maybe just buy a quart bottle and do that, okay? And now most of those are in glass, so just keep that lid loose, or transfer it to a plastic bottle. Yes. Yeah, half a cup for 64 ounce. If you're going to do a quarter cup. I mean, honestly, if I put a drop in here, it's going to ferment. It just might take a week. So a half a cup works really well in a half gallon to ferment overnight. I would think of it, so her question is, how much would I drink in a day? Think of it kind of like people drink wine. I mean, that's the whole reason, Paul told Timothy, take a little wine for your stomach. It helps with digestion. So you can just kind of think of it like that. You might want to just take a quarter cup and drink it with a meal, or I don't really think that way. When I want it, I get some and I drink it. Yes, it does. It eats it. Yes. So it greatly reduces the sugar content of the juice. It's kind of like milk and yogurt. Yeah, it's eating the sugar. That's digesting the sugar, and a byproduct is lactic acid, and the yeast is producing carbon dioxide. It didn't do as well. It may take longer. It could have been he said he used cranberry juice and it didn't do as well. I've done cranberry juice. Our favorite Christmas punch is cranberry juice, pineapple juice, and a bottle of ginger ale to make the bubbly, and then almond extract. And that was our punch at Christmas. Well, then I learned about this. So now I ferment the cranberry juice. Don't do the pineapple juice. That's nasty. Citrus is nasty, fermented, it's rotten. And then I use this like my ginger ale. And the thing that's so nice about that is if you have punch left over, it doesn't go flat. It continues to get carbonated. It continues to bubble. So our kids come and go at Christmas, and I just pour it in my drink dispenser, and if it's cold, it just stays there, the whole several days. So it's a probiotic drink. Very similar to kombucha, just different organisms. So it's the same concept. Sauerkraut, yogurt, kimchi, those are all different fermented foods. Kefir, milk kefir, yogurt, all different fermented foods. Some have different organisms, yes. The difference in kombucha and kefir is different organisms. This is your lactic acid organisms. This is the same organisms you use for sourdough, the same organisms that ferment milk kefir, the same organisms that live in your gut. Now, kombucha organisms are too, but the predominant organisms in kombucha are acetic acid organisms. So instead of producing lactic acid like these do, and this lactic acid is just tart, okay? Kombucha organisms, they produce acetic acid, which that is why kombucha tends to taste more like vinegar. Yeah. So I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with this drink. A lot of people are afraid to try it because they've tried kombucha and they're like, yeah, no. I mean, I like them all, and we should be doing all kinds of fermented foods. We're one of the only ethnic groups in the world that does not eat and drink cultured foods at every meal. I mean, you go to like in Greece, we ate yogurt just about every meal. And fresh fruits and vegetables, of course, have those organisms on them too. So anyway, and we have a use of antibiotics here, has killed our good gut organisms. So this will just help get that balanced out, and it's so easy. And I'll tell you, I drink water for the most part. I don't drink tea and carbonated drinks. My beverage is water. But a day like today, when I've been talking all day, you just kind of just like, I want something carbonated. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do tonight when I get home. I'm going to put on my pajamas, turn on the Bulldog game. I'm going to fill me a cup with ice. I'm going to grate some fresh ginger with my mincer over that ice. I'm going to put a little splash of almond extract, a little splash of vanilla extract, and I'm going to pour my kefir juice over that, stir it up, and it is the most delicious, all-natural, probiotic cherry vanilla ginger ale you've ever tasted. So there's so many things you can do with this, just like I make our punch with this now. You can muddle lemon and mint, fresh mint for your little mojito, Now, yeah, so there's so many, just do it. Just drink it. You'll love it, all right? I think we finished. I'm 3 minutes early, So come get some bread as you pass out. Come get some kefir. Thank you so much for being here today. Go Dogs.